Session of the Aurora City Council for Monday, June 13, 2022. It's called to order. Would the clerk please read the roll? Call the
Mayor
roll.
Hoffman,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Bergen,
Here.
Councilmember Coombs,
Present.
Councilmember Gardner, Councilmember Jurinski, Councilmember Lawson,
Here.
Councilmember Marcano,
Present.
Councilmember Medina,
Here.
Councilmember Murillo,
Present.
Councilmember Sundberg,
Here.
and Councilmember Zavanik.
Here.
There is a quorum.
Announcement of the call-in line.
Good evening. Thank you for joining tonight's Aurora City Council study session. If you are listening on the phone, please note public comments are not taken during study sessions. The phone line is in listen-only mode. The City Council welcomes comments at regular council meetings on both matters appearing on the agenda and during public invited to be heard. The phone lines open for sign-up on those evenings at 6 p.m.
There's no mayor's update. Are there any issue updates? Seeing none, is there any objection to moving item number 4B, prosecution of violent crimes, up to follow the consent calendar? Seeing no objection, with unanimous consent, item number 4B will move up behind the consent calendar. Is there any objection to moving the consent calendar item number 2A through 2D forward? Anything? Councilmember Coombs?
Thank you. Councilmember Murillo and I have some interns joining the call to learn about local government. So I'm going to pull up item 2A just to demonstrate to them how that works.
Oh, okay. Is there any objection for moving item number 2B through 2D forward? Seeing none, item number 2B through 2D will move forward. With clearing up item number 2A, consideration to reappoint 4 members to the Oil and Gas Advisory Board. Discussion?
Mayor, can we just have a brief presentation from staff or the chair of the committee?
Brief presentation by staff.
Yes, good evening, Mayor and council members. Thank you so much for your time this evening. I'm Jeffrey Moore. I'm the manager of the Oil and Gas Division and the staff liaison for the Oil and Gas Advisory Committee. Brad Pierce, the chair of the committee, is also with me this evening. I'll give a very brief presentation and then he'll be available for questions as well. Tonight we have 3 current members that we are recommending for reappointment. Those are Brad Pierce, Philip Holmes, and Mark Cooper. Brad is a citizen member. Philip is the industry member, and Mark is a surface owner member, and each of those will be appointed for a 3-year term beginning on July 1st of this year, 2022, and continuing through June 30th of 2025. All at the request of the city clerk this spring, all boards and commissions did some review of memberships and terms, and we've made some adjustments. We realized that over the years, since the Oil and Gas Advisory Committee began, there had been some members that have been reapproved at times that did not match up with continuous 3-year terms. And so we have one appointment that we would like to make this evening that would be for a term that actually began last year and continuing then for 2 additional years. That is James Felholsky. So his term actually would have begun July 1st, 2021 and would be a 3-year term, but it would end in June 30th of 2024. And that is the end of my presentation.
Further discussion? Seeing none, is there any objection to moving item number 2A forward? Seeing none, item number 2A will move forward. Item number 4B, prosecution of violent crimes. Councilmember Zavanik.
This is where's this 4B?
4B.
4B. Yeah, so I'm going to turn this over to staff to introduce it. But just to tee it up, a reason for this and having this tool available for us really goes back to a bill that passed the legislature a year ago, Senate Bill 271, which was misdemeanor reform. But unfortunately, buried within that legislation was a change to a number of felony crimes. Specifically, there was they decriminalized or allowed for possession of weapons by previous offenders, including people who are convicted of drug dealing and aggravated motor vehicle theft. And given the fact that Colorado now leads the country in motor vehicle theft, and we've had a number of challenges right here in Aurora, this IGA between the U.S. Attorney's Office and the 18th Judicial District would put a tool in our tool belt, allowing us to federally prosecute these felons in a way that the state law now does not allow us to do. So with that, I'll turn it over to staff and to our presenters.
Mr. Batchelor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councilmember Zvonek. As has been noted, there was a change in state law that decriminalized possession of weapons by prior offenders. So in seeking ways to address those continuing offenses, we have discussed with the U.S. Attorney's Office the ability to prosecute these federally in federal court. And so they are willing to partner with us. What that partnership would look like is we would sign an IGA, intergovernmental agreement. We would take a city employee, so a city attorney to be a city FTE hired by the city, and then we would essentially send that prosecutor to work for the U.S. attorney and prosecute Aurora cases in federal court. And so there's two items on here. The first is working with the U.S. attorney. The second item is working with the 18th Judicial District. And so if we can, my recommendation would be to sort of take those as two separate items. And again, the first item is this item with the U.S. attorney to do an intergovernmental agreement. They send their apologies. They had intended to be here tonight, but something came up and they're unable to join us. But staff can answer any questions you may have about the proposed IGA and the type of cases we're seeing, how we think this would help us. And then if there's any questions we can't answer, we will circle back with the U.S. Attorney's Office and get those questions answered.
Are there any questions? Are there any questions of staff on the IGA with the U.S. Attorney?
Mayor?
Councilmember Combs.
Yeah, so I just noticed in the backup, it looks like it's just a template piece of legislation that says like, and from your jurisdiction here and representative name here. So I was just wondering where the model legislation came from.
Sure, the template came from the U.S. Attorney's Office. This is actually something that they do across the country. They will partner with local jurisdictions. You'll notice, I think in the template, it refers to a variety of jurisdictions. And so this is something that they will do across the way. Chief Oates has told me that he has seen this in other jurisdictions, and it is sort of a model partnership to not only for dealing with the specific issue we have, but in general also dealing with violent crime and other charges that could be charged in federal court.
Further questions of staff? Seeing none, is there any objection to moving an IGA forward with the U.S. Attorney's Office?
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, the only thing I will add is Councilmember did appropriately point out, it is just a template. If council is amenable to this, we will fill out that template. So you all are when you see this item at formal council, we'll have filled in those different details. So you have those details. We really just wanted to bring forward the concept, make sure you all were supportive of that concept. We will now sort of conclude negotiations with the U.S. Attorney's Office to fill in those details and bring you forward a completed IGA for action at a regular meeting.
Okay, 18th Judicial District.
So this one, sir, is a similar issue. We've seen an uptick in violent crime, particularly as it relates to our regional anti-violence enforcement network, Raven. And so the 18th Judicial District has approached us about the ability to seek, I guess, a similar partnership where we would fund prosecutors. These would actually be employees of the 18th Judicial District for them to do cases in the 18th Judicial District. We do have Assistant District Attorney Tom Burns with us, and they are available to answer any questions you may have for the 18th Judicial District.
Mr. Burns?
Thank you very much. Good evening. My name is Tom Burns, and as said, I'm the Assistant District Attorney here in the 18th. I've been working for this office almost 10 years, and for a lot of my time, I spent focusing on prosecuting violent crime, including everything from homicide trials to gang violence, assault, shooting cases. Of course, we work closely with the Aurora Police Department and our state and federal partners on investigating, prosecuting those violent crime cases. The rising rates of violent crime, of course, have been really alarming, as you know. Since the position I'm currently in under DA John Kellner, we've increased our capacity to address violent crime and focus on criminal groups that are inflicting this violence. For example, with increasing the prosecutors we have in our organized crime unit and trying to focus on shooting cases, the groups that are drug trafficking, who are conspiring to commit robberies, car thefts, other crime sprees. And of course, one of the task forces that we partner with is the RAVEN Task Force, the Regional Anti-Violence Enforcement Network, particularly focused on gun violence and identifying those actors responsible for shootings and leveraging the resources we have for forensic investigation, including cell phone technology and ballistics testing, to identify and connect those responsible for that violence in our community. So the proposal would be to increase our ability to assign prosecutors from the 18th, particularly to work on the RAVEN cases and the way they impact Aurora and our surrounding area. And we think that some of the most productive investigations we are able to work on to address that significant rise in violent crime and shootings would be assigning people to increase what we can bring to that RAVEN task force. We're currently board members, but we're non-voting board members because we don't have anyone permanently assigned there as a prosecutor or investigator. But we think that that would enable us to leverage resources and help with these cases because they not only are bringing connection and proving cases to bring those offenders accountability, but they're really stopping people who are inclined to participate in these shootings and getting those guns and those actors off the street. So the concept would be to help us to fund those prosecutor positions to work on the RAVEN cases particularly. I understand it would take some time. We need to have the best people in those positions, and with the current challenges to recruiting and training in the competitive market, we think it would take a little while to get someone into those positions, but as a long-term partnership, we think that would be especially helpful, and I'm happy to answer any questions about it.
Mayor?
Councilmember Zavonic.
Yeah, just a comment really, because thank you for that, Tom. You've heard a lot about RAVEN and the important partnership that it can land. And another reason why I think this is so critical for us to be involved with and have, again, this tool as we continue to see the number of shootings in our city go up, the likelihood of the need for more prosecution is going to continue to grow. But RAVEN actually had put out a report that had Senate Bill 271 been in effect from 19 to 21, they would not have been able to charge approximately 30% of their cases against felons in possessions of guns. So, of course, this leaves more potential shooters, with guns in their hands and on our streets. Having these prosecutors assigned to this allows us to go after them and charge them federally, since state law has become overly permissive. So again, I think it's another great tool in our tool belt to partner both with the U.S. Attorney's Office and the 18th Judicial in order to try to help bring more safety to our community.
You said Senate Bill 271. Are you referring to Senate Bill 217?
No, 271 it was misdemeanor reform. 217 was the police reform. 271 is misdemeanor reform.
Okay. Well, I have a question. Is there a precedent for this? Because your budget comes from the respective county commissioners appropriate your budget within the respective counties that serve the 18th Judicial District. So it's a little unusual to ask a municipality to fund positions in your office. Can you elaborate, speak to that?
Yes, of course, it would be supplementing that budget. We continue to go to our counties for those primary resources, but it's something we're exploring and looking to supplement, especially given the effects in Aurora and the assistance we think this could provide for prosecuting those cases.
Well, can't you go for a supplemental appropriation now?
From the counties, we could. So it would be in addition to that, of course, and if it's not available from the municipality, then of course we could continue to ask for that supplement from the 4 counties that we talk to every year.
But you haven't yet gone to the counties for a supplemental, have you?
Not on this mid-year yet, no, Mayor. At the last request, we asked for some increases. We were granted some of them, but not all of them, and this would be in addition to those requests to the counties.
Further discussion?
Yes, Mayor.
Councilmember Lawson.
Yes, I just have a question to Jason. I know we're considering the 18th judicial. What about the 17th judicial as well? As we have issues in that jurisdiction of our city as well.
Yes, ma'am. We've not been approached by them. We were approached by the 18th Judicial District with this request. We could approach the 17th if council would like us to do that. But again, they've not approached us at this point.
Mayor?
Further discussion? Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes, I mean, I definitely think this is a good idea in terms of being able to prosecute those committing serious crime. I guess my question is kind of along the lines of the mayor's with the funding. So if in the last couple years with the escalation in crime and the violent crime, you have not been able to prosecute all the cases that come to Aurora, correct? With the resources that you currently have?
We have increased, and thank you for the question, we have increased, as I mentioned, the organized crime unit by a couple positions over the last few years, yes. But we think that the additional resources that could be added would help from the investigation stage and building the case, working more closely with Raven than we're always able to. We're not rejecting these serious cases that come to our office, but that involvement earlier in the investigation and being involved with the collection of evidence, the proof requirements, we think that that added resource could be valuable with the proactive policing that some of these cases are requiring and the benefits we see from early involvement and focusing on the right actors.
Okay.
I want to
So
say,
if I understand,
go ahead.
so if I understand you correctly, then a lot of the cases that you do prosecute, though, because of the limited resources in the last few years, have just have taken longer, and this additional 2 prosecutors in your office would allow a speedier, I guess, resolution.
I think we could do more to focus on those investigations, to bring them to completion, but also to help with the speed of resolution in handling those cases in a very focused way once we get them on board, whether it's a state prosecution or working with the U.S. attorneys on federal cases and charges where it seems to fit.
Okay, and Mayor, may I have a follow-up to staff? Jason, are we funding this for a 1-year period? I didn't see if it was ongoing or just for a 1-year period and then reevaluate. I guess I'm asking because if we fund it, which it sounds like I'm in favor of funding it, but if we fund it, would the county be able to then backfill, for example, next year?
I think that's guidance we would want from council. I think obviously in discussions with the 18th DA, they want some certainty over funding, but I think that would be a matter of negotiation between us and the 18th if council chooses to move forward.
Okay, so there's no end date on the...
Oh, it would be subject to annual appropriation, so you all would have to appropriate funds each year.
Okay, thank you very much.
I just want to say I'm really disappointed that you haven't even, that this is a responsibility of county taxpayers. And it is unprecedented to go to a municipality and ask for a municipality to fund what are the county's responsibilities without even having gone to the county to request a supplemental, the respective counties to request a supplemental. Am I correct in this?
I'm sorry, Mayor, is that a question for me?
It is.
We have not yet gone to the counties. It came up based on discussions with, opportunities that may exist with help from Aurora, but it's something that we plan to continue to address with the counties and see what's available.
Further discussion.
Here.
I'm sorry, is there further discussion?
Yes, Mayor.
Councilmember O'Connell.
Thank you, sir. And thank you, Mr. Burns, for your comments and presentation thus far. I do have a concern, actually, it's a shared concern with what some of my colleagues have expressed. It is my understanding that Arapahoe County still has CARES funding that I believe could be appropriated to this use, because you can draw a connection between the pandemic and the increased activity in the criminal legal system as a result. And I don't know what the status is of the other counties in your judicial district, but I would prefer to see you all go to them first, then come to us. I'm supportive of having a properly staffed judicial district, obviously, but this is a substantial chunk of change when we've already, I think, gone through most of our CARES funding. And we certainly have a lot of other priorities in the city as well that need to be addressed.
Further discussion or questions? Seeing none, is there objection to having the requested appropriation for the 18th judicial move forward? Mayor objects.
I object.
Excuse me. Sorry.
I object.
Councilmember McConnell.
I object.
Councilmember Medina.
Coons.
Councilmember Coons.
Murillo.
Murillo. Further objection?
Mayor, I object as well. Councilmember Lawson.
Proposal does not move forward.
Mayor, can I?
Mayor?
I'm
Mayor?
sorry. Mayor.
Nope.
I'm sorry. Who desires to speak at this point? Mayor
Well,
Protem.
Is there any way to fund this temporarily until the county is approached? I mean, we need to solve violent crime, and we are getting complaints from our citizens all the time, every day. So I was just wondering if there was some gap measure that we could fund it until they are able to ask for supplemental funding, because what if the county doesn't fund it? Then we're not solving crime.
All the counties of the 18th judicial district. I mean, we can spend a lot of money different ways on fighting crime, but this is absolutely unprecedented, and it is absolutely incredible that they would come to us before they would come to the people that have the responsibility and not even ask them for a supplemental appropriation. I mean, that's just unbelievable.
Right, I'm just asking if we can fund it temporarily until.
Let me defer to the assistant district attorney. Say, is there a way to structure it differently where you actually go and ask the people that have the statutory obligation to fund you first?
I think we can we can take that to the counties and we could return based on their position. And I'd be happy to address it with the counties, just like I'd be happy to talk to all of you and answer any questions I can about it. But
well, I tell you what I would ask you to do with all due speed, because we're, having gone to the city of Aurora first and only the city of Aurora, and not the respective counties that are responsible for your budget, is just inappropriate. And so I would wish you with all due speed to go to the counties and request the funding first, a supplemental appropriation. If you can come up with a different plan, I'm more than happy to entertain that before the council, where we would, so that maybe the city would be reimbursed. Well, maybe that is what about language that we would, in fact, that you are going to do your job by going to the counties, respective counties of the 18th Judicial District, with all due speed. We will temporarily fund those positions with the idea that we will be reimbursed. That we will be reimbursed when you receive your supplemental appropriation. I don't even know if that's appropriate. Discussion on that.
Mayor.
I'm sorry, Councilmember Mercado.
Yep, thank you, sir. I'm not sure if that's the appropriate path to go. I would rather actually get affirmative confirmation from the counties first that they're going to take care of this. And I also just wanted to mention, since it was brought up, that this isn't a solution to crime. This is ensuring that we're able to actually hold folks who've committed crimes accountable. Those are two different things. And I'm always happy to discuss actually how we prevent crime, but that is not what this conversation is. Thank you.
Right. I think this is very important. I just think
Mayor?
Structure's mixed up. Yeah, Mayor Protem.
Yeah, no, it's not about that. It's the fact that we have so many repeat offenders out there that don't ever get prosecuted. And you can hear from our police officers, a lot of the people that are actually committing vehicle theft and so forth are repeat offenders that never go to jail. I would be in support of either being reimbursed or doing a temporary solution.
Mayor.
Councilmember Zelenik.
Yeah, this isn't a solution to, like Councilmember Marcano said, to stop crime, but it is something to make our community safer, which is something I take as a very serious responsibility of this council. And I think it's good that the 18th Judicial go to the counties. My concern is that when you look at the 18th Judicial District, there might be very little appetite for the rest of the counties. And that's not to say they shouldn't do their due diligence on this. But I would assume, and I'm sure we can get these numbers from them, but the overwhelming number of prosecutions they will be doing with these types of crimes in federal court are going to come from our city. And with shootings up in our city, I think that we have to throw every tool in our toolkit at them. I like the idea of having them do their due diligence with the counties. My fear is that there won't be the appetite amongst the other communities to have these special prosecutors that can prosecute federally in order to go after these types of crimes, when it really is a problem that is probably predominant in Aurora.
Further discussion.
Mayor?
Well, I think I think you need to go to the counties first, and then we'll deal with it if the supplementals decline. But I mean, procedurally, that's where you really ought to be. I think this is very important. I think it's very important to fund it, but I just think you had that the 18th Judicial District has an obligation to go to the counties first.
Mayor Sundberg?
Councilmember Sundberg.
Just a quick question. This may have been touched on, but Tom, how long do you expect that process to take to go to the county and then return with a type of an answer? Or how long does funding take from counties?
It's hard to tell. I think we could put something together in about a month. It just depends on what their process is for that. And I can tell you, we have talked to our counties about increases in the annual cycle, and we filled additional prosecutors to focus on violent crime and the organized crime unit. So it's not as if this hasn't been an ongoing discussion. We have been asked and we've been approached about ways we could increase prosecution on these types of crimes. And I'm here to tell the council that this is one of the areas where we think that would be particularly helpful. It's not that we're not prosecuting these cases. It's not that we're not involved early when we're approached, but I was asked to give some perspective and to give a proposal to increase resources. And we think this would be a more longer term solution. So we'll be talking more about it plenty with the counties. I plan to come back anytime we're asked to talk about what we could do with a partnership with Aurora. But it's not as if it's a short-term solution only. It's an area we continue to expect to build. And as far as the possible solution of a temporary funding, I really think that this is a little bit of a longer-term project when it comes to recruiting, training, and assigning prosecutors into this area. And we would be looking for a longer-term commitment than just a short fix there. Thank you.
I'll ask you to go to the respective counties with all due speed. And I would be happy to make phone calls as well to county commissioners to fund this aspect of law enforcement, which is clearly their responsibility. If in fact you fail, then we should revisit it as soon as possible.
Mayor,
Sir.
Mayor Protem.
could we draft a letter on behalf of mayor and council to the county commissioners stating the urgency for this funding?
A very good idea. Is there any objection to drafting a letter to county commissioners of the 18th Judicial District? Very well, that will be done. Seeing an insufficient support to move it forward. Item number 4, the 18th judicial part of item number 4B then will not move forward at this time. Thank you, sir. Item number 3A, photo speed enforcement pilot program. Lieutenant Bennett.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Sergeant Chris Carlton with the Police Traffic Unit, sitting in for Lieutenant Bennett as he's out on vacation right now. We're here to speak to you about a possible photo speed enforcement program as we were approached to take a look into this to see if there's a way to efficiently increase traffic safety in the residential areas and the school zones. We believe that a photo radar program may make these areas safer. We're looking to council for their recommendation on this possible solution to the speeding problems in these areas. We believe that a 1-year pilot program would be very useful to see if we see a decrease in traffic complaints, and also to find out how a speed enforcement program would work with the city. This would give us the information necessary to properly craft a full RFP for a long-term solution. Our understanding is that the way the resolution is currently structured, it's asking for a RFP for the study. Our recommendation would be that we go with a sole provider for the study. That way we see how it works, and that we were able to craft a better RFP to send out to vendors if we decide to go forward with a long-term solution on this process. State law restricts the placement of mobile radar vans platforms to 4 areas. We can use them in residential neighborhoods, school zones, construction zones, and streets that border municipal parks. CRS also outlines that the violations have to be witnessed by a full-time employee of the department. And this is in conflict with city ordinance right now, which indicates that that person observing the violation has to be a full-time sworn police officer. As it's written right now, it doesn't help us when it comes to our staffing issues. So if the decision is made to go forward with this pilot in the program, that issue is going to have to be changed or addressed in the ordinance. So if we do that, we have to change the ordinance so that that can be a full-time employee versus a police officer. A vendor, yes, sir?
No, go ahead, please.
A contracted vendor can provide the equipment, training, back-end processing needed to send out the violations, collect fines, and do all the back-end stuff. There's nothing necessary for the police department or the city to provide for that aspect of this program. Scott Stewart is here from Conduit. They're just one of the possible vendors for this solution. We've asked them to present to you folks on the current photo enforcement technology, and the benefits they've seen and how it works in cities that they deploy this solution throughout the country. So with that, I turn it over to Scott Stewart.
Okay, questions of staff. Let me begin. So you need an ordinance change, so we're not using a post-certified officer, basically asserting the violations, correct?
Correct.
And then would the contractor supply the equipment and the personnel?
Yes, they would. We would contract with them to supply those. I believe the person witnessing the violation would be an employee of the city or the department, and then we'd contract through the vendor for the equipment and the processing on the back end of the violation.
Oh, sorry. So in each mobile unit, you would have to have a city employee and not a contract employee?
It would be a city employee.
Oh, okay. And how many units are there going to be?
We'd be requesting 3 units.
Okay. Questions of staff?
Mayor Sundberg.
Councilmember Sundberg.
Now, this equipment, I believe, is able to capture a number of vehicles nearly at one time as they go down the road. Is that correct?
It is. And like I say, Scott Stewart's here. He's got a presentation that will address any questions you have as to vehicle identification and that sort of thing when it comes to the violation, so that everyone's clear on how it identifies one particular vehicle for one particular violation, so that there's no mistaking which vehicle committed the violations.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, did you say by state statute that we're required to have an employee versus a contract employee?
State statute says that it has to be an employee of the police department.
Okay. Further discussion. Questions?
Mayor?
Mayor Pro Tem.
Yes, and obviously we've seen a huge increase in speeding and all kinds of, automobile accidents. On the client summary report by location, where it has like clarity of the plate, dark environment, exposed or expired plates, that type of thing. Are those then, so are those the ones that you just have, you can't ticket?
Yeah, those are what we call controllable rejects. So those are things like where the flash is overexposed. And by the way, in different study sessions, we've talked about different ways to illuminate the license plate and to illuminate the driver. And we can use things like infrared. So white light flash is not a necessity, but yeah, things like clarity of plate, maybe there's mud or snow on the plate. If we cannot clearly identify the characters of the plate, then it would never hold up in court. So our reviewers wouldn't even pass it on to city staff to even approve.
Okay, and then like you said earlier, then one of our officers would definitely review each one before issuing or having you guys issue the citation.
Yeah, to be clear, in certain states across the country, you must have law enforcement review violations. In Colorado, it has to be a city or county official or employee. It does not have to be a sworn officer. The state legislation does not dictate it has to be a law enforcement official. But as Sergeant Carlton alluded to, there is an ordinance within your city that theoretically could be revised where law enforcement did not have to review. Currently, law enforcement apparently does have to review.
Okay, and this is a 1-year pilot, and then after we get all the data, we could reevaluate whether we want to continue the program, correct?
Yeah, and there's precedent for that. So we've done that. We've done sole source pilots before. We did it in the state of Maryland. We did a 1-year pilot there. They then submitted for a competitive RFP, and we were coincidentally awarded the contract there. Delaware is doing the same thing right now, and they're going to go to competitive RFP. We've done sole source pilots in Beverly Hills and Salt Lake City. So yeah, that would be the idea.
Okay, yeah, I don't have a problem with the pilot not being an RFP. Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Further questions?
Mayor.
Councilmember McConnell.
Thank you, sir. So first, would the 3 FTEs requested, are those going to just be effectively an expansion of our non-sworn traffic unit?
Yes.
Okay, great. And then second question that I have here, and I think I asked this during the public safety presentation as well, but I don't think I got the answer I was really looking for. Was that one of the examples that was provided in the backup was a reduction in fatal crashes in the city of Portland. And I think I had asked if you had data to, that could maybe clarify how much of that was due to enforcement and how much of that was due to the pretty serious traffic calming measures that the city of Portland had been undergoing during that same period. Because, either way, I think that there's merit to the pilot, but I'm looking to see if we should also embark on a more aggressive two-pronged approach here in the city. And also with regards to any revenues generated from this, how my colleagues would feel about earmarking that for capital improvement, specifically for traffic calming in our neighborhoods.
Yes, I can answer that question to a degree, and the answer, unfortunately, is that it's undetermined. And sometimes that happens in these scenarios when you can measure data in enforced intersections, for example, or enforced roadways, pre and post photo enforcement. And you can attribute the reduction in crashes, reduction in fatalities towards photo enforcement. But can you definitively say that it was specific for, those reductions happen specifically for photo enforcement? Nobody can definitively say that. There have been other studies in other parts of the world where they have implemented engineering redesigns, and the same thing happens. They see a before and after result, and they attribute it, at least anecdotally, to those engineering designs. And Portland has made engineering designs to some of their streets, and they believe that that's had an impact. That said, Portland also believes, so much in automated enforcement that they're doubling the size of their program. Yeah.
Further discussions, questions?
Mayor
Vonick?
Yeah, so a question for the city attorney's office, and this goes back to our current code and what is required of the officer. Is it not true that it requires us to review the data in the moment, and they actually have to be with the equipment under our current code?
I actually can answer that.
Zervonic, I'll defer to Scott as well, and then I'm happy to follow up as well.
Yeah, the state legislation indicates that you must witness the violation. So that goes back to the city, county, or law enforcement official must physically witness a violation. So you have to be there to witness that violation and essentially mark it down that violation happened before it can constitute an issuable citation.
Further discussion, questions?
Mayor?
It's Councilmember Medina.
Yes, sir. Thank you. A couple questions on the 3 units. If we get the 3 units, how are those going to be put out in community? Are those going to be through council requests, or hitting hotspots?
We as a vendor don't make any decisions as far as where those vehicles are deployed. We rely on our clients to make those decisions, and those decisions are typically done based on, crash analysis, crash data. In Portland, for example, they have something called the high crash corridors, where they've measured, incidents that have happened over a decade, and they choose to, install cameras in those locations. These we project that they would be mobile units, so you could deploy. You've got a lot of flexibility there, right? So you could deploy wherever you saw an uptick in these incidents.
Okay. Follow up.
Member Medina?
I'll proceed.
Yes, go ahead.
Our recommendation would be that we would deploy one van for each of the districts. That way the districts could address the speeding concerns in their particular areas of responsibility as the complaints come in.
Okay, thank you, sir. One last question, sir, if I could, Mayor. Is there any issue around vandalism of the equipment? I'm just curious.
There's less issue when there's a operator present. So we do deployments like fixed pole deployments and portable camera deployments and trailer camera units, where because these systems are completely automated, so you can literally stand them up in a location and you can walk away and they can deploy for hours and hours on end. When you have a vehicle that is, manned, so to speak, and the vehicle has tons of decals on it, typically, we allow the city to decal that unit. It does significantly decrease the instances of vandalism in that case.
Thank you, sir.
Mayor Sundberg?
Further questions?
Mayor Sundberg?
Councilmember Sundberg.
Thank you, sir. I think Councilmember Marcano brings up an interesting idea of using revenue or excess revenue from such a project to fund other traffic calming measures. I've been involved in a couple of school areas in which speeding and child safety is a big concern, and including with Councilmember Lawson. And in those situations, the budget is often next to nothing, and we're trying to partner with APS and so forth. So that APS or at the school zone speed mitigation could be something to consider.
Yeah, it's
Questions?
Mayor Arcana.
Councilmember O'Connell.
Thank you, sir. And thank you, Councilmember Sundberg. I wanted to bring that same point back up because I don't think that got addressed the last time I spoke. So I do appreciate that. And I would like to get a sense of the council if we can add that to the resolution as well. And then I do have a question for legal, I guess. If I understood part of the discussion earlier, we're going to have to first amend our code to allow non-sworn civilian, officers effectively or APD employees to handle tickets. Is that correct?
Councilmember Arcana, that's correct. We would have to amend the ordinance just to allow a civilian employee to make those determinations in lieu of a sworn officer.
Okay, thank you. That's something I'm supportive of doing as well. I guess that would have to be a companion to the resolution then, correct?
That's correct. We could do the resolution and then go ahead and amend the ordinance once we go through the other process, or we could simply add the ordinance change to the next council item if that's the way the council wants to go.
Okay. Yeah, my 2 cents is if we're all, leaning towards approving this pilot, that if everyone would be okay with just bringing that straight to the floor so that we can get them done at the same time.
I mean, is there any objection to moving the ordinance change forward to the floor? Okay, then that will move to the floor then.
And Mayor Kaufman, one point of clarification, is council also in support of doing the sole source RFP process instead of an RFP process with this as well, to amend the resolution to reflect that?
Right now it's structured as a sole source, correct?
It's not. It's actually structured as an RFP for the 1 year period. So is it council's preference to structure it as a sole source and amend the resolution to reflect that?
Is there objection to moving it forward as a sole source contract for the simply for the pilot 1 year pilot program? Okay, very well. Then it will move forward as a sole source contract for the 1 year pilot program.
Mayor.
Thank you.
Councilmember O'Connell.
Thank you, sir. And was there any objection to, effectively earmarking funds above the fines towards capital construction for traffic calming?
Let me ask staff a question first. Normally, when we get fines like this, where are they dedicated? Is it?
So typically what we would recommend from a staff perspective is we want to cover the costs to administer the program first. So we would want to make sure that we're covering obviously the vendor costs. We can discuss whether or not you want those 3 employees included in this or not. And then to the degree there are funds above that, absent any specific direction, they would normally flow to the general fund, but council can make a decision if they want to as to how you would like to see those funds allocated. And I think what I've heard council discussing here today is that any revenues in excess of covering costs of the program, and that depends on how we define costs, would go for traffic calming, I believe is the proposal.
Okay. Traffic calming, I'm sorry, Councilmember O'Connell, was that in school zones specifically?
No, just traffic calming generally, but obviously we'd be able to attack school zones with that too.
Okay.
So we would come back to council with some prioritization of how to use those funds, but the first thing we'd do is collect them, set them aside, and then we'd come back to council with how we're going to allocate them.
Okay. So is there, first of all, as to how we define the cost of the program? So how about contractor costs? Since we're already funding the 3 FTEs, irrespective of the program, am I correct in that, Mr. Bachelor?
No, we currently don't have these FTE in the budget. So again, it would be a general fund add if you wanted to not have them go against the revenues of the program, or they could go against the revenue of the program. It's
okay.
Direction.
So how about this proposal, Councilmember O'Connell, having cover the cost of the entire program, and then any surplus, any remainder, then would be dedicated to traffic calming.
That sounds fine with me, sir.
Is there any objection to that?
Mayor?
Mayor Pro Tem?
No objection. I'm glad that we're covering the cost of the program first. So, and then adding the traffic calming.
Okay. Any other objection? Seeing none, then that's the direction that we'll take. I don't believe there are any other issues yet. Any other issues to resolve? Am I correct in that, staff?
No, sir. I think we've got direction. Megan, I think we have what we needed to move forward. Sergeant Carlton, anything else we need?
No, nothing from us.
Nothing for me. Thank you.
I think we've got what we need. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Item number 3B, city-owned impound lot exploration resolution. Councilmember McConnell.
All right, thank you, Mayor. So yeah, the goal with this resolution is simple. It's to give staff the direction to explore how we can put together a publicly owned impound lot with the goal of waiving all fees for victims, to structure the fees for the lot otherwise to ensure that we're able to cover the costs, to include some restitution in there, although it's my understanding in staff discussions that restitution is going to be very, very rare, maybe 5% of cases at most. But generally speaking, set this up so that it operates in a revenue neutral fashion with all costs considered. So with that, I'll defer to Pete Schulte, who helped in the crafting of this. So if there's anything else that you want to add, Pete, go ahead.
Thanks, Councilman Marcano. And basically, you know, what I can say is obviously the state statute really governs how much can be charged from either any government or any vendor that we do. And as Councilmember Marcano does, we outsource our lot where these vehicles are stored. So generally, a lot of larger cities do this because it allows them to maintain some more control and to reduce costs for its citizens. I know Denver does it. I know Colorado Springs does it. Where I came from, I know Dallas and Fort Worth and San Antonio, all the big cities have their own impound lot that came off over the through the police department, through civilian employees. So, and again, I think when Councilmember Marcano brought it to us, he wanted to see just to get a pilot presentation from us, from staff, to see what the feasibility is of it.
Further discussion.
Mayor?
Mayor Pro Tem.
Yes, I'm happy to see this come finally forward because I was on public safety in 2018 and 2019, and I know Jason Batchelor will remember this, but I specifically asked staff to do a analysis of what it would cost for us to do an impound lot. And Mr. Batchelor, could you tell me if we did anything on that note?
I have no recollection of that at all, ma'am. I don't know what you're.
Yeah, you do know.
No, ma'am. We actually did. I think this has actually been a discussion that council has looked at over the years. I will tell you that in general, what we've found that there's a pretty high upfront capital cost associated with acquiring land, constructing the facility, and then so that's been the general finding. I don't know when the last time we did that. The time frame you mentioned might have been the last time, but I know that since I've been here almost 14 years now, we've looked at it at least 2 or 3 times, and those are the general findings. There's going to be a pretty significant, capital cost on the front end to acquire the land, construct the lot, security, lighting, and those things. And then you're either going to just have that be a sunk cost, or you could potentially look at what a cost recovery looks like for the capital over time. And those are kind of, I think, some of the things that if council passes this resolution, that we would be looking at in this type of study. What are the capital construction costs? Could you expect a cost recovery? What would be the operational improvements? There could be some significant operational improvements for the department. So those are the type of things that we would be looking at. But you're right, ma'am. This has been looked at a number of times over the years. We've just never been given formal direction to proceed past, kind of a high level exploratory phase.
So land construction, security, obviously manning it operationally on ongoing costs. And I think Councilmember Marcano's proposal is to get to at least to a revenue neutral, not that we're going to make money kind of model. And obviously I'm supportive of the fact that, we have victims that have their vehicles stolen and then impounded, and then they're faced with the cost of recovering their vehicle. But so in the past, we didn't actually do an analysis of what you just mentioned.
We've typically gone as far as getting a high level construction cost, and then typically at that point, council said, okay, given the everything on the capital plate, we'll put that on the list and not move on.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Further discussion?
Mayor, Councilmember Lawson?
Member Lawson?
Yes, I'm supportive of this. I guess when this goes through, I guess my question too, I know we're focusing on the crime victims as well, but people who also get their cars towed will be going to this lot, I think. And so one of the things in Colorado Springs that was brought up in some questions about it is people who just leave their cars there, and then it's on the onus of the taxpayers to have to deal with that. So I'm hoping that we'll have those discussions when this comes up. I know we're focused on the crime victims, and I'm fine with that, but I know if just from other situations as well, that will have to be discussed too. Am I correct?
Yes, ma'am. We would, beyond crime victims, if there's other folks that have their car towed, that they would be subject to fees and for towing and storage and things like that. In addition, currently with the operations, if a car is considered abandoned and legally, if it's not claimed within a certain period after legal notices are given, the car is considered abandoned and then it's sold at auction. And so those would also be another potential revenue source for the operation of the impound lot.
Yeah, Councilmember Lawson, this is Pete again. So yeah, I mean, the state statute really governs all of those processes. So all the money that our vendor that is storing all the vehicles now, that revenue, and again, I used this term before, it's a cash cow. I mean, there's so much money in this part of the business. And so it is a way to reduce costs and to pay the city back for the cost that it takes to, because it never fails. We have to impound vehicles.
Further discussion?
Mayor.
Councilmember McConnell.
Thank you, sir. And I also wanted to bring up, because I failed to mention earlier, that there's also a potential for partnership with other law enforcement agencies, Colorado State Patrol, the county sheriff's offices as well. And I think that that's something that staff will be exploring as they analyze this proposal further.
Is there any objection to moving item number 3B forward?
Sorry, Matt, I just have a question.
Councilmember McConnell.
So would this mean that all people towed within the city of Aurora, even if it's a private HOA, any situation like that, they would all go to this lot? Is that correct?
I think the first off, Councilmember Coombs, is that this would just be used by the police department. Now, if we entered into an agreement with other private towing, because we're not going to be actually doing the towing, we'll be the police will be calling for the tow, and then they'll take it to this lot. Now, if we enter into an agreement with the HOAs, some of the individuals, I think that's part of the overall discussion. Because there are still private lots out there that want to stay in business to do this type of work. So that's what we would look at. We would have to enter into an agreement with those to take other non-police towed vehicles.
Further discussion?
Mayor Sundberg?
Councilmember Sundberg.
I want to thank Mayor Pro Tem Bergen for being willing to have this lot in Ward 6, first of all. And then secondly, the forecasting budget-wise for this is ultimately break even. Is that right? It will break even, if not make some extra revenue.
The goal is for it to break even. We're trying to make, to not get into the business of profiting off of towing.
Gotcha.
Yes.
And then have we approached, is it M&M towing? Is that the current main impound area? Have they learned about this? Have they come forward and said, hey, we're going to drop our prices significantly, or do they have any response whatsoever?
I did have a chance to speak with, I believe, the current owner of M&M, and she did, bring up that the APD has already negotiated some reduced rates, all of which I was already aware of. But that's, we still ended up, I believe, and Pete, correct me if I'm wrong, but it was close to $1 million in fees to Aurora residents for motor vehicle thefts just last year. So we can certainly do a lot better for our residents. So yeah.
Thank you.
Mayor.
Is there further discussion?
Mayor.
Councilmember
Drensky.
I'm sorry, Councilmember Jurenski.
Yeah. So with what Councilmember Marcano just said, almost $1 million in fees last year in car thefts, and that's a reduced rate. I just want to point out that speaks volumes to the car theft issue in Aurora.
Further discussion? Seeing none, is there any objection to move item number 3B forward? Seeing no objection, item number 3B will move forward. Item number 3C, amusement device license repeal. Councilmember Gardner, is Councilmember Gardner here? Trevor Vaughn.
All right. Yeah, I've been working with Councilmember Gardner on part of this for several months, and this also went through the Red Tape Reduction Committee because there's a component of this which will benefit existing Aurora businesses with less licensing requirements. There's been some issues over the years with what some refer to as gray casinos. Sometimes they were called sweepstakes cafes, where these operations set up devices that operate very much like slot machines, and they're seeing this in other parts of the state currently. And these operations, they're also seeing crime associated with these, and we've seen some of that as well historically when we've had them. We have an amusement device license requirement. Part of that requirement is that the device not reimburse the operator in coin or currency more than what they put in. And that's what we've used in the past in order to address the gray casino operations, the simulated gaming. There's also been modifications in state law to address that as well. Some of what we're seeing is just with the latest iteration of the gray casinos that they're paying out in cryptocurrency in order to try to get around these laws. And there's always been tricks with trying to prosecute them and address it. So part of this ordinance actually enhances, kind of improves our regulations, catches them up with time and whether, you're paying cash, coin, currency, cryptocurrency, gift cards, those types of things, and puts that in improved regulation. But along with that, we do have a general business license requirement in the city. We don't think in order to deal with those regulations and enforcement, we don't think we need a special license requirement in order to do that. So amusement devices currently are required to obtain a license, and really that dates back a long time to kind of a period when the city licensed a lot of occupations. And so along with this, we've identified that the amusement device license requirement could be repealed, and that's a big benefit in fee-wise, especially to arcades that had a lot of the impacts during the pandemic with closures, but particularly benefit to arcades. Along with that, amusement device vendors, which place devices in the city. There are 7 of those. They would no longer have a license requirement along with this. This also then brings in the Carnival licensure requirement, where the city has a requirement for Carnival licensure, and that actually is not dealing with rides. It deals with Carnival games and making sure that those are fair. And then basically we have utilized a chunk of code from Denver to kind of reduce that to one paragraph and eliminate the licensure requirement for them is what's proposed in here, as well as elimination of Chapter 10 of the City Code, which deals with Carnival games. So those various pieces are put together, and some of the language we've used comes from Virginia state law that was passed recently to address these simulated gaming, as well as some definitions in the city of Denver, which actually they use them differently. But it does also make it clear that operations like Dave & Buster's are allowed because they're an amusement center, and the amount that you put in skee ball, if you play it all night, you're not going to get something that's worth more than what you put in. Into the skee ball, for example. So kind of clarifying that they're legal as well as crane games as well. So we don't believe existing Aurora businesses are impacted by the cleanup and regulations. It just makes it a little cleaner. In fact, they'll benefit from the removal of the licensure requirements. With that, I can take questions.
Further questions?
Mayor Jurenski.
Councilmember Jurenski.
Yeah, this is something. And I know that Councilmember Sundberg does as well. So I just want to ask for clarification, Trevor. So does that mean establishments like mine and Councilmember Sundberg's, if we decide to add a third pool table, a second golden tea machine, something like that, we no longer have to call in, update the the license is it's just gone. We can have
That's gone.
however many devices we want.
Yeah, just gone, just as long as those devices are legal. So any simulated gaming devices, if somebody approaches you, for example, and says, hey, in Nebraska, I do these things and it looks like a slot machine, that wouldn't be allowed, or something. Coin pushers are another example. Those are considered slot machines under the state gambling laws. But yeah, as long as it's allowed, additional pool tables, arcade games. Currently we require licenses for Super Mario Brothers, and probably is not. It's not really necessary.
Further discussion? Seeing none, is there any objection to moving item number 3C forward? Seeing no objection, item number 3C will move forward. Item number 3D, reducing distance restriction between liquor stores and drug stores. Councilmember Zavonic.
Yep. So this is just like the previous one. This is a ordinance coming out of the Red Tape Reduction Committee, and this is something that's brought forward by Trevor and his team. We asked them to bring forward ideas of rules and regulations that were on the book that could help make Aurora more business friendly. In this case, currently on code, we have a 2,000-foot setback requirement from a liquor store to an existing liquor store. Colorado revised statute or Colorado law requires 1,500 feet. So all of this does is bring us in line with state law. With that, I'll hand it over to Trevor to fill in any details, but it's pretty straightforward.
Pretty straightforward, yes.
Are there any questions of Councilmember Zavonic or staff? Seeing none, is there any objection to moving item number 3D forward? Seeing none, item number 3D will move forward. Item number 3E, Colorado Science and Technology Park Urban Renewal Plan Amendment. Andrea Amanek.
Yes, good evening, council members. We have a presentation for you this evening on the proposed amendment to the Colorado Science and Technology Park creating a second TIF. I'm going to ask Chad Argentar of our staff to make the formal presentation, and we're both here to answer any questions you might have. Chad?
Great. Thank you, Andrea, and I think I was just given permission to share, so give me one moment. It is really small on my screen. Can everyone see the title page to the presentation?
Yeah, we're seeing the full. Yeah, we see the full Excel, or sorry, PowerPoint.
There we go. Hold on. There we go. Okay,
there you go.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, council members. I wanted to, I'm Chad Argentar. I'm with our Urban Renewal Authority and Development Services. I wanted to do a brief presentation on the proposed update to the Colorado Science and Technology Park Urban Renewal Area Plan. Take you through a short history just to make sure everybody's up to speed on where we've been, and then talk about what we've done to date and some of the next steps, and then leave rooms for question. Come on. There we go. Just for orientation purposes, this is a map of the existing CSTP urban renewal area. The southern boundary of this urban renewal area is pretty much Montview Boulevard, and then it goes up to Fitzsimmons Parkway. Right now there is an existing tax increment financing district, which is in the eastern portion of the urban renewal area. I'll talk about the proposed TIF number 2 in a moment. Really briefly, this is a very condensed time frame of the medical garrison that opened in 1918. But we got here today because of the BRAC process when the base was targeted for closure, and the city started making efforts to offset the economic impact of the loss of the jobs and the revenue that the base brought to the community. When the base closed in 1999, the 3 different hospitals were already on board with relocating to Aurora just because of their expansion needs. The urban renewal area, the CSTP urban renewal area, actually was carved out of a larger urban renewal area that was created in 2001 to help with redevelopment of the former medical base. And that's largely just because the development south of Montview with all the hospitals, that was progressing at a much quicker pace. And it was just from a timing and a redevelopment implementation purposes, CSTP was carved out and created in 2008. Since that time, most of the development has occurred in the western or the eastern portion of the urban renewal area, largely due to the fact that the Fitzsimmons golf course was still owned by the Army, and it wasn't until 2016 that FRA was able to get title to that land, and that's where we started looking at, and FRA started looking at how to prepare for the redevelopment of this very large area, the western portion of CSTP. There we go. As I already mentioned before, the whole impetus of redevelopment of the base was to use this as an economic opportunity for the community. And already a recent study that we've commissioned through the University of Colorado Business School, they've measured a $10 billion impact on the state economy from the entire north and south of Montview, from all the entities on the base, and existing employment of close to 30,000 and more to go. In the Colorado Science and Technology Park urban renewal area, there's over 1 million square feet that's already been developed. Several years ago, Fitzsimmons FRA rebranded its CSTP as the Fitzsimmons Innovation Community. That was to deal with some of the changing market conditions in the bio and life science industry. Previously, they were looking to do large medical research campuses, the Pfizers, and they've rebranded as the Fitzsimmons Innovation Community to take it in a different direction, which had more partnerships with the hospitals, more incubator space, and so on. When they did that, they updated the GDP. At the same time, the station area plan was being developed when the Fitzsimmons station was imminent. This is, let me go back, whoops, went too far. Just here's some numbers. I'm not going to spend too much time on that. We can revisit it if you'd like, but this is showing what's been developed so far in TIF area number 1. TIF area number 2 is what's proposed, and I'll talk a little bit about that right now. And then on the left side of the screen is the general development plan in place for the entirety of the urban renewal area. The reason why we are updating the urban renewal plan is simply because it's been 12 years. A lot of development has occurred, and the rebranding of the campus, the changing market conditions, the time frame, and especially the need to create a second tax increment financing area, it requires that we update the plan. The tax increment financing area that the second one would be in the western portion, as I mentioned, and on this screen you'll see the black dotted line. That's everything mostly west of Scranton. Everything in gray on this map it's what's been built. Conceptually, you'll see in the TIF area number 2 is potential building layouts, but the grid system is pretty well engineered at this point. That's been planned for a long time. There's going to be about 4 million square feet of a new development opportunity, including about 1 million square feet from the university. The infrastructure, the infrastructure needs to put in all the horizontal infrastructure is about, in today's dollars, around $84 million. That's not including any cost of financing, which brings it well over $100 million over what's been projected. But the initial infrastructure is going to occur over in phases over 10 years. And these next 4 slides, again, I'll just go through these quickly, but kind of show how the infrastructure is going to be laid and the lots developed. And then there's some additional infrastructure to be put in place over, past the 10-year period as well. So when we create a new tax increment financing district under current state law, it's a little different than in the past for some of you council members who may be familiar with things. One of the important elements is working with the different taxing entities that have mills in the proposed TIF area, and that includes Adams County, Mile High Flood District, Aurora Public Schools, even the CSTP Metro District, as well as the City of Aurora. And in order for us to amend the plan, we need to negotiate and discuss the sharing of incremental revenues with these entities. We've met with them, and we have agreements now with one-sided agreement right now, at least approved by Adams County, and I'll talk about our process next, but Adams County has agreed to give up, contribute 70% of their incremental property tax revenues to this project area. Mile High Flood, 100%. Aurora Public Schools, we are finalizing an agreement with them, which will be in line with what Adams County is doing with 70% of property taxes. CSTP, of course, their millage is meant for this area, so of course they're giving 100% back into their own area. And for the City of Aurora, it's typically 100%, and in this case, we're also proposing 100% of the use, lodger sales, and OPT taxes. And that's these details of these revenue sharing is in 6.75 of the Urban Renewal Plan. We still have to finalize and draft an agreement with the CSTP Metro District in terms of the sharing of these incremental revenues to them. The authority will collect the increment as agreed to by the different taxing entities, and then we'll have an agreement that we will bring back for approval. But 60% is what is being proposed to help of the property taxes to help fund the payment of their cost of infrastructure over the years, and then 50% of other city taxes that are which are much smaller amounts compared to property taxes, but 50% of other city taxes would also be going to contribute to the fund the infrastructure. I skipped over this. There is an element of this plan to use some of the increment that we are receiving for community programs and services to benefit the immediate community. Can answer any questions about that as well. That's in section 6.72 of the plan. So in summary, we've seen a lot of development within CSTP with the acquisition of the golf course. We are FRA, or the Fitzsimmons Innovation Community, I should say now, is prepared to fund the infrastructure necessary to attract users and builders for the rest of the campus. We have pretty much completed our negotiations with the other taxing entities, and we are in the process of where we are now is to formally adopt the amended plan as included in your package. We've already set the public hearing, as you know, last week for July 11th. We met with the Planning Commission. We met with the Policy Committee earlier as well. At the July 11th, we'll have a formal hearing regarding the adoption of the plan. At that same meeting, we'll have the IGAs regarding the incremental revenue sharing between the different taxing entities in the agenda as well, contingent on, of course, the plan being adopted. And then following that, we would complete and return with a public finance and redevelopment agreement with the Metro District regarding the infrastructures. Oops. So with that, unless Andrea has anything extra to add, happy to cover and answer any questions for you. And thank you.
Mayor?
Mayor Pro Tem.
Yes, I have a question on the tax increment finding. Is that for 25 years or is that, are there shorter periods on the different, entities with APS, Mile High, County?
That it would be for 25 years until the infrastructure is paid off.
Okay, and then on the lodger's tax, is that typical in our other TIF areas that we do 100% on the lodgers?
Yeah, in general, in the past, we have taken lodgers tax and use taxes. There was some original concern with other taxing entities that the city might want to do other things, and so with that were the city's responsibility, and so taking 100% of those revenues allows for those revenues to be available to the city to do other projects in there that would be city responsibility.
So of the lodger's tax, how does this affect, how does this affect the Visit Aurora?
So Visit Aurora in urban renewal areas, Visit Aurora doesn't get the normal percentages of the lodger's tax. If there is a desire for that to happen, there are some agreements that we've done to return a proportionate share, if you'd like.
Yeah, I'm 100% on board with, obviously the bioscience campus, and this is such a jewel for the city of Aurora. Just wondering if it would make any difference for lodgers taxes to not be 100%, if it helps to advertise and promote our area.
So that's fine. The hotel that's currently planned there is a small boutique hotel. It's not as significant as, say, the Conference Center Hotel across the street.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Further questions of staff?
Mayor, Councilmember Lawson?
Councilmember Lawson.
Yeah, Andrea, I just have a question. So 5% is going to go towards community benefit, correct? And then within that community benefit setting, there's going to be a makeup of some type of board that will contribute ideas to how to benefit this community. Is that correct on that, what I'm stating?
Yes. At the time as we've discussed, one of the things that we had to do under the new statute is negotiate with all the other taxing jurisdictions. Since they are also contributing percentages of their taxes to that community benefit fund, they have indicated that they would like to be involved in, while the board will have sort of the ultimate, the AURA board will have the ultimate decision of where the taxes go. I think that in terms of specific programs, so let's say the board wants to do housing, low and moderate income housing, then that can go to a separate board that represents each of the taxing jurisdictions to talk about what, where the housing should be, what kinds of areas, and how they might support that, both, because they all have vested interests in that, certain types of housing create services for schools, certain types of housing creates services for the county to provide, et cetera, et cetera. And so they have indicated that they would like to be involved with that. And we think we can accommodate that in discussions with our board.
Further discussion?
Mayor?
Mayor Pro Tem.
It's Councilmember.
I'm sorry. Okay. Further discussion?
Yes, Mayor.
I'm sorry, Councilmember Combs.
Thank you. So I guess my question is, in terms of approving this, I know we still have a public hearing before us, but are the landowners, the folks working on it, the developers, available to talk about parking, surface parking lots, and kind of land use in that respect? How much they're relying on surface parking lots versus structured parking and how that's distributed among the quality.
So I believe that April Giles is here from Fitzsimmons Innovation Community, but as the plans as development goes through will still go through the normal planning process. And this end of the campus is intended to be very dense. So we anticipate fewer surface parking lots than like say currently exist and development of more, because we don't want to spend a lot of land on parking. We'd rather spend it on development that creates jobs, right? And so, but there's time both in discussion of site plans as they come through for this area, as well as general, if you'd like a general discussion, April Giles with the Fitzsimmons Innovation Community is, I believe, on the line. I don't know if she would have the ability to participate.
But are there any other questions while we're waiting? Or discussion?
Do you want to see if April can
Yes,
speak to that?
Please do.
Okay. Let me see if she can get on.
And let me ask, is staff done with the recommendation, with the presentation?
Yes, Mayor.
Okay, very well. Is that individual available?
I'm okay with waiting until the actual public hearing if that's easier. They can just be prepared to discuss that.
Okay. Is there an objection to moving item number 3E forward? Seeing no objection, item number 3E will move forward. The time is now 7:57. Council will stand in recess until 8:07. Council is now in recess. Study session of the Aurora City Council for Monday, June 13th, 2022 is back in order. Item number 3F, amendment to the Unified Development Ordinance, multifamily building length. Brandon Camerata.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council. Brandon Camerata. I am a manager in the planning department, and I have a brief presentation for you all tonight. So, hold on.
Mayor,
Oh, I'm sorry.
I think he's talking, but he's muted.
I'm sorry, you're muted. Oh boy.
Oh, my apologies. Thank you. All right, we'll try this again. So my name is Brandon Camerata, manager in the planning department. Today, a brief overview of a ordinance we would be bringing forward later this month to amend the UDO to allow to increase the maximum allowed building length of multifamily buildings from 150 feet to 600 feet. Having a little trouble with that. Before I jump into the ordinance, when we're looking at multifamily from a zoning perspective, the primary items we're usually looking at are parking quantity and location, usable outdoor space for the residents, as well as landscaping, as well as some building design requirements. With any set of design requirements for a particular land use, the goal is for them to be working together in providing a balanced approach to the regulation to provide reasonable levels of compatibility or assurances of compatibility to surrounding areas, a regulation that's calibrated to our community and achievable by the market, and provide a predictable path forward for development. And for the most part, the regulations that I kind of broadly provided an overview of have been working well together and have largely been met, with the one exception of the maximum building length. And as you can see, about 2/3 of the proposals we've seen over the last 2 years have had to request an adjustment or an variance from that requirement to ask for a larger building. And also noteworthy is that all of those adjustments have been approved by either the Planning Commission or in some cases through the City Council. So over the last 2 years, as you saw, we've had over 22 projects now. So there's been an opportunity to take a look at the nature of the projects we've seen, how many, how big, how often, those type of elements. Also, we've had the opportunity to reach out to design teams that have proposed and gone through our entitlement process over the last 2 years. And some of the items we gleaned from those discussions were that an affirmation that the market is changed from what it was maybe 10 years ago, and it's producing larger multifamily buildings than it used to. As you know, we worked with those design teams, both staff and the design teams felt like, quality multifamily developments are being produced, but how do we address this adjustment request? And some of the suggestions were use the tools that are working well and to make sure it's simple and objective. So those are things that we've tried to incorporate with our proposal. Also noteworthy is we've gone through other public processes, including PED in May, also a public hearing in May at the Planning Commission, where Planning Commission did recommend approval of this ordinance. And we've continued to keep that design team appraised of the status of the ordinance as we've moved through this process. So basically, the same as where we were at PED about a month ago. We're proposing really a simplified ordinance. Instead of a variety of maximum building lengths, we're having one that is 600 feet. We've taken the approach of being what I call a backstop sort of regulation, meaning we're snapping the line behind what the market has been providing to the community. And we've also looked to utilize the regs that are working when it relates to multifamily in those regards, which include the existing architectural design elements, building entrances onto the street, and amenity spaces. So that is a brief overview of what we'd like to bring forward, I believe, in 2 weeks. If there's any questions, I could try to answer them.
Questions to staff?
Mayor?
Councilmember Lawson.
No, it's.
Oh, Mayor Pro Tem, I'm sorry.
That's okay. So in the proposal, they would still have to have, you said the architectural designs, but then also possibly courtyard or something to break up the building, correct?
Mayor, through you, correct.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions to staff? Further discussion? Is there any objection to moving item number
3F?
Item number 3F forward? Seeing none, item number 3F will move forward.
Thank you.
Item number 3G, youth violence prevention, community prevention funding, Christina Amperin.
Hi, good evening, Council. Let me just get my PowerPoint up and running. Okay, do you all see my PowerPoint?
Ma'am.
Okay. So I'm here to present the prevention NOFO funding recommendations. As a reminder, the total budget for prevention funding is $100,000, with each organization being eligible to receive up to $10,000 on a payment reimbursement basis. All the organizations would be required to submit supporting documentation and performance data when they are submitting their payment reimbursement forms. Organizations are only eligible to receive one-time funding during this funding cycle. To date, we did receive, or we are moving forward with 10 prevention NOFO applications. As being presented here, recommendations, funding amounts have been modified based on feedback received by council. And all of these applications do support a public health approach as well as the YDP strategic plan in an effort to address risk factors and increase protective factors within the community. Next steps staff would take would include processing agreements with each organizations and would capture ongoing performance data to be able to report to this, to our leadership here. The question that we do have for council is, does council approve this resolution and us moving forward as presented?
Questions to staff? Discussion? I'm sorry, Councilmember Medina.
Yes, I just want to let everybody know I sit on the Welcome Center board. So for that one there, I would like to say, I would recuse myself from that.
Understood. Further questions to staff, discussion?
Mayor?
Councilmember Lawson.
I don't have a request, but I don't have any questions on this, but I would like to propose that we move these fundings here and vote separately on each of these organizations and programs on the June 27th meeting.
Very well. If I understand your request, it's that we are to vote for each funding request separately
Yes, Mayor, on June 27th.
on the floor. Very well. Further, is there a discussion on the Lawson proposal?
Mayor.
Is there any objection? I'm sorry, who would like to speak?
Yes, Marcano. Yes, thank you. I'm okay with doing that as long as we actually discuss each one, because I'd like to know from my colleagues why we are going to be, supporting or not supporting some of these, because I was really taken aback by what happened last time we voted on this stuff. Thank you.
So is it, Councilmember Lawson, then it's your intent to vote on them each one separately?
That is correct, Mayor, at the June 27th meeting.
Very well. Is there objection to the Lawson proposal? Seeing none, that's the way we will proceed. Very well. And Christine, do you have any more of your presentation? Okay. Questions? Seeing none, is there any objection then to moving item number 3G forward as amended? Seeing none, item number 3G, then we'll move forward. Item number 4A, opioid abatement intergovernmental agreement. Kirsten Classbell.
Okay, I'm sharing my slides again. Do you see my presentation?
Yes.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Kirsten Claspel from the Budget Office. Tonight's presentation will be a recap of the Colorado Opioid Settlement Memorandum of Understanding that you approved last year in October. And one of the things that the MOU requires is the formation of 19 regional councils across Colorado that are tasked to develop plans to address the opioid crisis on a regional level, with Aurora being part. Overview of the intergovernmental agreement that has been reached between Arapahoe County and the municipalities within the county, including the appointment of one Aurora representative to the regional council. The related resolution is in your packet tonight. We also have updates on the Douglas County and the Adams County regional councils. That is not included in your packet due to timing, but we would like to share recent developments in those areas as well, so that we can include council feedback when meeting with the counties. A bit of history. On October 25th of last year, Council approved the Colorado Opioid Settlement Memorandum of Understanding, which established the framework for the distribution and utilization of funds from opioid settlements. And it also includes a long list of approved purposes as to how the funds may be spent, with a focus on abatement strategies. A few things have happened since last fall. Earlier this year, the first settlement agreements were finalized, with the biggest one being the Johnson & Johnson settlement, which really set in motion the terms of this MOU. So there's a lot happening at the moment. A state abatement council has been formed that oversees the implementation of the MOU and the money that's coming to Colorado. The abatement council is currently working on putting systems and procedures and timelines in place for governments to request the settlement funds. On a regional level, 19 councils are being formed across the state by the end of September. So lots of movement there, and we'll go into more details here a bit. So the next two slides will be a brief summary recap of what the MOU framework looks like. This slide shows the allocation formula of the settlement proceeds. There are 4 main buckets. 10% of the settlement proceeds will go directly to the state. 20% will be distributed directly to local governments. The biggest share is the regional share, 60%, and 10% will go to specific abatement infrastructure projects, which is really envisioned to serve the more rural areas that receive less funds, but also don't have the infrastructure in place, like detox facilities, peer support networks, such things. The city of Aurora will benefit mainly from the local government and the regional share. About 1/4 of the local government share will go to the 3 county areas that Aurora is located in and will be distributed between the counties and the municipalities within that area. The regional share will be distributed to the 19 regions, which will be governed by the regional councils. Again, Aurora is part of 3 single county regions. We have not officially received information on exact dollar amounts yet. So what we know so far is that we will hear from the state on the city share in the next couple of weeks, so very soon. The payments are going to be made sometime this summer. Payments will be spread out over 18 years based on current settlements that are finalized. They are front-loaded, which means the city will receive more funding in the next few years, and then it will taper off over the 18 years. That being said, not all settlements have been finalized, so there may be more funding in the future. Therefore, we would really like to focus on the structure of the regional councils tonight, rather than discussing policies to get the structure set up so that the work can start, so to say. This slide illustrates the relationship between the abatement council, the regional councils, and the participating local governments. So each regional council needs to develop a 2-year plan identifying the use of funds by the region for approved purposes. Submit this plan and request related funds from the abatement council. The abatement council reviews the plan and releases the funds, and the regional council will provide annual expenditure data for transparency purposes. The first tentative deadline or opportunity for regional councils to submit their 2-year plan will be mid-September. And yes, that overlaps with the deadline to form the regional council. So if councils are not able to meet that deadline, there will be another opportunity 6 months later, sometime in March, to submit the 2-year plan. On the local government share side, the abatement council will provide the city with exact dollar amounts in the next couple of weeks, as I mentioned, with the request to either opt in or opt out of the local government share. If a city opts in, the abatement council will release the funds. The city will provide annual expenditure data. If the city opts out, the amount will be redirected to the region. So why would a local government decide to opt out? The main reason is that many municipalities, especially the smaller ones that receive just a couple $100s a year, for them it's just not worth the additional work that's associated with spending and reporting on those amounts. At this time, we believe that Aurora is big enough that we are suggesting to opt into the local government share. We are planning on forming an internal committee and discuss funding options that we will bring back to council. There is lots of flexibility as long as the city stays within the approved purposes defined by the MOU. And if later on council decides to not spend the money on, let's say, city-run programs, but would rather give it to the regions, we can do that too. By opting in, the city at least has the option to discuss ideas and evaluate funding options internally first. So this was a summary, a recap of the MOU, including some updates. And now Kendall Kocha will present the IGA with Arapahoe County.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'll provide you that brief overview of Arapahoe County's Regional Council IGA. This is the structure for the resolution. So they are structured this IGA so that it is in line with the Colorado MOU, and that the regional council will submit a 2-year plan to the abatement council identifying approved purposes for the funds to be used. And the council's designated fiscal agent will then produce annual reporting data. And please note that that 2-year plan can be amended. So it's not set in stone. If other ideas that come up, other situations arise that the money should be spent on, those ideas can be, the plan can be amended to bring those forward. So the regional council can appoint advisory committees such as a group of subject matter experts for a technical advisory committee or a staff planning committee. And currently an RFP is in place to hire a facilitation services company to help with development planning, assist with meeting facilitation, as well as engagement and deliverables. And annual expenditure reporting is also required as part of this IGA. Next slide, please. The Arapahoe County regional voting members will consist of what you see here. I won't read the entire slide, but it's important to know where the city comes in. There will be 4 representatives appointed by municipalities within the county: Aurora, Centennial, and then 2 rotating seats from the western and the eastern smaller cities. Aurora has the largest population in Arapahoe County, serving 335,000 residents, and I am rounding there, which makes up more than half of the population. There's also going to be non-voting members on this regional council, and then the fiscal agent has been identified now as Arapahoe County. Next slide, please. So the questions for you are, does council wish to send this resolution forward to formal approval? And who does council wish to appoint as the City of Aurora voting member to the Arapahoe County Regional Council? And I'll open it for questions as well.
Mayor?
Councilmember Lawson.
No, it's
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. I would love to be appointed as one of the, I guess it's 4 representatives I guess as the Aurora representative.
Is there any objection to Mayor Pro Tem being the Aurora representative? Seeing none.
Mayor, not objection necessarily. Am I recognized?
Councilmember Combs.
Thank you. I'm just wondering what is the role of those representatives and what kind of qualifications are we looking for, right? Because there may be people who are experts in substance abuse, mental health, things like that, that we want to appoint versus of ourselves as elected officials.
So are there subject matters being appointed?
There will be subject matter experts appointed by the council themselves. So right now, the MOU and the IGA specify that it has to be an elected official.
Okay. Further discussion? One elected official will be appointed then by council that is a member of council. Am I correct in that?
Yes, and then you, Carson, correct me if I'm wrong, but there are some non-voting. There could be possibility for other members to come on board as non-voting members.
Well, let me ask the city attorney a question though. The selection of a council member, does that have to be done on the floor or can it be done in study session? And does it have to be ratified on the floor?
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Isabel Evans, litigation manager for the City Attorney's Office. The appointment to this council can be done tonight at study session, but you could also continue that to next regular meeting when we discuss this further.
Mayor Pro Tem has put her name forward. Is there objection to having the Mayor Pro Tem be the council's representative as an elected official?
Mayor.
Is there objection, Councilmember Combs? Is there further?
Mayor?
Councilmember O'Connell.
Sorry, I couldn't tell if you could hear me or not. I'm not objecting. I just want to ask a couple more questions of staff. So this body is going to be, in part, with some of these other subject matter experts, steering the settlement monies, right, towards the goal of appropriating those funds to address the issue, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And I guess I just have a quick question for Mayor Pro Tem Bergen then, since she's put her name.
You know what, let me throw this in. I tell you what, I think procedurally, we're just better off doing this on the floor
Mayor,
and nominating, Mayor Pro Tem.
I would rather just discuss it right now because this is how we do all the other appointments to outside boards is we do it during study session. We don't do it on the floor.
Very well. Further discussion.
Mayor.
Is there objection?
Mayor.
Councilmember McConnell.
Sorry, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry about that. I'm using a different headset today. Yeah, so a question for Mayor Pro Tem Bergen then, since, we have the opportunity here to directly address the opioid crisis in, evidence-based, ways with some of the subject matter experts that are likely going to be appointed to this body. I just want to know, are you going to be supportive of things like detox centers, of harm prevention issues like distributing opioid antagonists, safe use centers, et cetera, supervised centers?
So I'll just say the reason I'm very interested in this is that I have had family members that have died from drug usage. And so it's very dear to my heart and I will listen to all the experts. I'm committed to making sure that we help as many people as possible in not being addicted to opioids.
Further discussion. Is there objection to Mayor Pro Tem being the elected representative?
Mayor.
Councilmember McConnell.
Sorry, thank you. And Mayor Pro Tem Bergen, I'm sorry to hear that, and I know that personal experience means a lot to you. I would just like a yes or a no from.
Oh, yes. Obviously detox centers. That is part of the process to help people not be addicted to these drugs.
Antagonist distribution.
Yeah, I'd learn more about how that works, but yeah, I'm certainly open.
Supervised use.
I'm not sure about that. I'd have to hear more about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there objection?
I just have a question.
I'm sorry, who's?
Combs.
Councilmember Combs.
Yeah, so Mayor Pro Tem, just along those lines, it sounds like you're willing to listen to anything that experts bring forward. So my question is just kind of about other adjacent kind of preventive measures, if there was something that was housing and addiction services connected, or those kinds of things that isn't directly addiction services, but support healing from addiction, are those sorts of things that you also be willing to support.
Yeah, I'm open to listening to all the proposals and all the solutions. I mean, it's really, you're trying to tell me to make a decision I haven't seen one single solution brought forward. So I think I will be very open and I will attend meetings. I will be, taking notes, and I will listen to all the experts. And I don't know what direction we're going to do funding. There's talk of Aurora Mental Health, for example, having detox services. So I don't know how any of this is going to work in collaboration together, but it sounds like it's a regional council. So, we're going to be collaborating together.
I think your answer is clear about being open. Is there objection? Seeing none, then Mayor Pro Tem will be the elected representative. Let's see, 4C, red tape. I'm sorry. Oh, and what is the other issue we need to decide?
There are actually two more quick updates on Douglas County and Adams County regarding the opioid, and hopefully that should just take a couple of minutes to let you know where we are with those.
Please proceed.
Kirsten? Sharing rights again. Douglas County recently had its kickoff meeting with the municipalities. Their recommendation for the regional council is similar to that of Arapahoe County in terms of county representatives. In terms of municipal representatives, they are proposing 4 voting member seats for municipalities with a larger population in Douglas County, which would be Castle Rock, Parker, Lone Tree, and Castle Pines. Combined with the unincorporated area, this represents about 99% of the Douglas County population. For Aurora, Littleton, and Larkspur, the county is offering 1 rotating voting member seat if there is interest. Anecdotally, we have heard that both Larkspur and Littleton may opt out of a voting member seat because of the small share of their population that resides within Douglas County, but they haven't made a decision yet. Aurora's population is in Douglas County is about 2,600-ish. Similar to Arapahoe County and other regions, there will be an advisory board with subject matter experts that will help the regional council evaluate ideas and develop a 2-year plan. Does council have any feedback for us on this? Are you interested in some form of participation, considering the small population affected? We're happy to take any feedback from council on the rotating seat back to Douglas County.
Discussion, recommendations?
Mayor?
Councilmember Combs.
I mean, I think that if we have the opportunity to kind of shape policy in any parts of our region, we could probably pitch it. But,
Further discussion? Then I'll put the Combs proposal forward of having a rotating representative. It's just from one of these communities, am I correct? Aurora, Littleton, or Larkspur?
That's right.
Very well. Is there objection? Seeing none, then that's the direction.
Thank you.
Okay, and then Adams County Regional Council is very structured very similar to Douglas and Arapahoe counties, again, all trying to be in line with the Colorado MOU. They have already procured a facilitation service company, Rocky Mountain Partnerships, which is RMP, and they'll work with the council to develop the 2-year plan submitted to submit to the abatement council, as well as help with meeting facilitation planning and deliverables. They've also created a dashboard to help get some of that communication data out already. Voting members, actually, next slide, please. Oh, you're already on it. Sorry about that. The voting members had already been determined. So those 6 voting members will meet this summer to find out who else might be a voting member on the regional council, or who else might serve on the advisory committees or as well. So so we'll stay tuned with that. We'll keep you advised on what, where they are with that, and we'll keep you updated with that. But just council have any feedback for us to take back to Adams County?
I'm just surprised that Aurora is not, that when we have a small slice of Douglas County, we'll have some representation. We have a pretty significant and growing slice of Adams County, yet they won't have a voting member.
Agreed that they made that decision and then brought that decision to us. So wow, so we'll just wait for an invitation for the next meeting and see if we can't jump on board with them.
Very disappointing. Please proceed.
Okay, thank you. And that's all we have for you tonight.
Mayor?
Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I had my mic on when I said, I think I said, oh my God, or something. So I apologize, but I do think it's important to convey to Adams County that we, feel strongly we should have representation.
Will do. Thank you.
Agreed.
Further discussion? Seeing none, are there any other questions that we have to address this evening in terms of direction?
Mayor
Okay,
Isabel Evans with the City Attorney's Office. I think the one final item that I think is probably a given at this point, but just for the sake of keeping the record clear, does council approve of moving the resolution to approve the IGA with Arapahoe County forward?
Is there any objection for Arapahoe County's IGA? Seeing none, the Arapahoe County IGA will move forward. Are there any other questions before us on this issue?
no, sir.
Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We've already addressed 4B, 4C, Red Tape Reduction Committee, Development Review Process. Councilmember Dustin Zvonek.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. So this resolution, it deals directly with the development review process. Throughout the red tape reduction hearings, we had a large number of comments that came in related to the city's development review process. Over the course of those hearings, staff has consolidated all of the feedback and the comments that we received and has developed an ongoing plan to address the underlying issues. Staff is going to do a presentation tonight to go through that plan and the timeline to implement the organizational and process improvements. Going forward, assuming this resolution is moved forward by council, there will be regular updates to the Planning and Economic Development Committee on a monthly basis, as some of these issues will be addressed in the short term and some of them will take time, but we want to make sure that we are responsive to all of the comments that came in throughout the Red Tape Reduction Committee hearings. And so with that, I will turn it over to staff.
Thank you, Member. Councilmember Zvonek. My name is Jason Batchelor, Deputy City Manager. Myself and my colleague Laura Perry, Deputy City Manager, are going to go through a quick presentation on the issues highlighted by Councilmember Zvonek. So next slide. As was noted, we heard lots of comments from developers and others associated with the city's development review process during the red tape hearings. And so we wanted to really kind of get our arms around those. We're hearing those same things. So this first slide kind of talks about how our development review process is supposed to work. So typically that starts with a pre-application meeting. That is an optional meeting, but we typically meet, lay out our requirements for the development process, and then really trying to provide guidance up front so that folks do not need to be guessing at what our requirements are as it relates to their project. The next thing down is you see master plans, and so those are at a high level. They typically cover a much larger area, and they're for large scale development. And again, it lays out our infrastructure requirements, including phasing and the timing, and defines the different planning areas. Because often what you'll see for a master plan project is that master plan will be broken up into several smaller phases or planning areas. And then typically the detail work is then done at the site plan. And those site plans are where we're going to get into the details for the specific layout of local streets, lots, the actual very detailed on the infrastructure requirements, and going into all those details. And so then once we have the site plan approved, we'll then go into our civil plans, and that's where we're getting our detailed engineering documents that are laying out road design, utility design, water connections, wastewater connections, all those different things, and that's where we're doing it. So items 1 through 4 are what we call our entitlement process. So those are where we're really doing the engineering, the planning, the zoning, any changes like that are needed, and getting the project fully entitled. Once a project is fully entitled, they transition to the building process, and so that's where we're really seeing things starting to be constructed. So once a project's fully entitled, they'll start pulling permits to put in roads, put in the other infrastructure, and then they'll also go vertical. So they'll pull building permits to build houses, to build warehouses, to build other structures. And so that's really where we get into the building process. And so then down below, you'll see kind of the schedule to where each of those different review times has published schedules for how long those reviews are supposed to take. Those reviews include typically 3. Those review times include 3 reviews. So there's initial submittal, an initial review, second submittal, second review, third submittal, and then that third submittal is supposed to be approved. And so that's on each of those different levels, whether it's master plan, site plan, or civil drawings. That's typically how we're seeing that process work. And the timeline down below shows you what that might look if those things were to run sequentially. We do have the ability to sometimes run those not quite simultaneously, but we can nest them. So we could begin the civil construction drawing documents, as we near the end of the DA, as we near the end of the site plan, we can begin the work on the civil plan. So if you did it sequentially, that would be about 28 weeks. If you nested them, you can certainly shorten that 28 weeks. And so that's what we work with developers to try and do. So when the process is working correctly, this is what it's supposed to look like. One of the things we've been hearing from developers, and we know you all have been hearing, is it's not working as correctly as it's supposed to at the vast majority of the time. And so we know that's what you're hearing complaints about. We're hearing those same complaints. We are hearing very, very high levels of volume. The volumes of work we're doing are very, very high across all fronts. And so it's something that is a challenge for us. And so it's something that we know we have to address. So next slide. The other thing we've done in terms of setting up the development review process is we've set up the Dell Development Review Fund, because council has said that development is supposed to pay its own way. So council wants development activity to come in. They don't want current taxpayers having to pay for the staff time associated with reviewing and approving those submittals. So when developers pay fees, those fees are going to the Development Review Fund to pay for all the staff associated with conducting those reviews. We've had discussions with ongoing discussions since 2002 with the development community. And one of the things that the development community really wanted to see is they wanted to make sure that our process was consistent and predictable. And again, that's where we're seeing shortfalls in some of the cases. Again, I think, depending on the area, we're at 70, 80, 90%, but we know you all are hearing about that 10%, that 15%, that 20% of projects that are not getting a consistent, predictable review. So we have process issues and workload issues that we need to address. So that's kind of at the heart of it that we've been hearing. And so again, that's how we're set up. So next slide. So what we focused on is improving our performance. And so that's what we really want to get back to, is making sure that our performance is delivering that consistent and predictable review times for anyone coming through the development review process. And we've identified 4 major areas that we need to break projects into. That includes management and leadership, culture and customer surveys, process improvements and technology, and then process documentation, teaching, and training. And all of that's driven by customer feedback along each of those way. So now I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Laura to kind of finish you walking through this in the next slides.
Great, thanks, Jason. Good evening, Council, Mayor. Laura Perry, Deputy City Manager. So over the next few slides, I'm going to highlight several of the improvement areas and the improvements within them. And then Jason will wrap up the presentation with a thorough and detailed improvement roadmap that we will be implementing. So to oversee our plan to address development review challenges, we established a development review governance committee in December of last year, which is comprised of leadership from all departments which touch development review. And this group is tasked with overseeing the implementation of the identified improvements and focus initiatives, which include customer service, organization and staffing, consolidated intake for reviews, submittal requirements update, and building a culture of continuous improvement across the organization through the tracking and evaluations of issues that have been identified by our customers through the feedback solicited throughout the development review process and the red tape reduction committee. Next slide. So customer service is really the heart of the development review process, and we are committed to building a culture of customer service. And as part of this effort, we're undertaking a reorganization of the Public Works Department to build capacity and really streamline the organization. Specifically, this reorganization will allow our development review staff to work more effectively and efficiently together and as individuals through the consolidation of development review functions in engineering, real property, and traffic under one new Public Works Development Review division, which will be led by a new deputy director. We will be also consolidating drainage plan review, currently a public works responsibility under Aurora Water, where drainage maintenance currently resides, to provide better efficiencies in coordination. And then lastly, the reorganization aligns building and public improvement inspections under one unified team, which creates an opportunity for unified inspection operations and consistency under the building division. It's important to note that the Public Works reorganization will also be paired with continuous process improvements to enhance the efficiency and effectiveness of the development review process going forward. And then lastly, process improvements and technology will also help with improving our partnerships. We'll be implementing improved quality control at intake and resubmittals, as well as implement plan review, comment standardizations, which include enhanced quality assurance and quality control throughout the process. And our goal in this is really to establish clear expectations and requirements for acceptable levels of quality on all documents, both internally and externally. Next slide. We will also be implementing several improvements in process documentation, teaching, and training. These improvements include an update on our submittal requirements, improved tracking and review of issues identified by our customers and internally by department staff, an improvement on the format and implementation of checklists across all departments, which will help with managing various development issues and quality control that arise through the process. We're undertaking code and manual updates, making them more user-friendly. The first phase of the roadway manual update was just shared with the JTF at their last meeting this last week, and Public Works will be moving that forward this summer over the course of the next couple of months. And then lastly, we're seeking to institute continuous improvement across the organization to ensure that we're providing the best customer service and breaking down silos throughout the development review process. So the improvements that I mentioned at a high level in the last several slides are really our first step in improving the customer experience while supporting our staff on the development review process by working with them to eliminate barriers in their work in the process. And as Jason mentioned, we're anticipating that more improvements will be undertaken as we begin to implement these improvements I walked you through, and we'll be sure to share that progress pretty routinely with the PED committee. And I'll kick it back over to Jason to get into the roadmap.
Muted, Jason.
You're on mute.
Thank you. Sorry. Thanks. As we continue to take those four major areas that Laura just walked us through, we have additional kind of roadmap initiatives underneath those that really amount to a number of action steps. So Laura already talked to you about the Development Review and Governance Committee. So that's how we're going to make sure that we're breaking down silos and talking across departments. She walked you through that Public Works reorganization. We're going to make sure that we're aligning the organization to provide the customer service and accountability we need. The next one is we'd heard some comments around an expedited review process. And so that's actually something that we had on the books. It was a process for expedited review. And then we kind of had shelved it during the pandemic. And then that demand is back. And so we have dusted that off. We're actually rolling that back out. That's available. We've got a couple projects we've identified that we think are good candidates, and we're going to be using that expedited review process for those projects that qualify. The next one is going to digital Mylars. So our entire review process is currently digital until we get to the very last step, and then we print Mylars. So we make the developers print Mylars, bring us paper things, and then we compare that paper printout to the digital plans that we've approved. So we are working with the counties because those digital Mylars, once they're reviewed, or excuse me, the paper Mylars are reviewed against the digital plans we've seen. They're approved, they're signed, they're taken to the county, and the first thing the county does is scan them in. So what we want to do is get that entire process, the digital digital. So we're working with all of the counties to transition that. We've had very positive discussions. We think that'll be a nice win for all of us, including the development community, to get to digital Mylar approvals. The next one, as Laura indicated, is we're going through and really looking at all of our guidance and reference manuals. She spoke about the roadway manual. That's just one example. We have other examples, whether it's the drainage code or master plan submittal guidance document. So we want to go through each of those so that if someone is submitting a document, we have written guidance for what is expected, what needs to be included, and there's no questions both from staff or from the applicant as to what's required, and that we're very clear. It's one of the comments we'd heard that folks thought that lacking that written guidance, that standards could change on them, and we don't want to do that. We want to have very clear requirements on the front end, so we're going to do that. The next thing we're doing is looking at our plan intake, corrections, and resubmittals, and again, that goes back to making sure that we have written checklists so that when things come in, we can check them, and then we're also looking from a workload standpoint, are there ways to align workload associated with intake so that our reviewers are able to spend their maximum amount of time that they can on reviewing things, and we have others that are doing intake on plan submittals. So next one. We're looking at a process to potentially look at multi-department review. So we might create project-based review teams to really kind of make sure that we're focusing on the project and trying to break down our silos. So this is something we're going to look at later this year. We're excited for this. It's something we're going to try and see how that goes for us. So we'll be reporting on that. The next one is third-party review referrals. So we refer projects out to a number of different agencies, whether that's CDOT, Denver International Airport, Excel. What we'd like to do is adopt what the state does. So currently we play, the broker, the middle broker. So we're kind of taking the submittal in, we take it, and then we refer it out to the referring agency. And instead, I think what the state does and what we think we're going to look at adopting is we're going to have the applicant get directly with those other referring agencies, and they're going to be responsible for providing us documentation that they've provided that their plans to those other referral agencies, and those referral agencies have signed off. Kind of gets us out of the middle. We think there's some times where we're the messenger and nobody likes to be the messenger. So we're going to make sure that they're getting the word directly from those referring agencies. Next thing we want to do is look at our milestone approvals and really making sure that we've got defined milestones throughout the process so that everybody knows what needs to be done in order to advance to the next stage. So we think that's probably going to follow on our update of guidance and reference manuals. The next thing we're going to do is include a process on plan review comments and tracking scorecard. We have some great examples of that that's been done in some other jurisdictions, and that really is making sure that we have visibility on an end-to-end of a project, that it's not just an individual step that was met, that really we've got from start to finish, how long did it take, how much of the time was with the city, how much of the time was with the consultants or the applicant, because we've often seen that where we get complaints about how long our process is taken, and the process can take a fair amount of time, depending on your point of view. But often what we're seeing is a lot of that time is perhaps spent with consultants or with the applicants. I would tell you that while city staff is very busy, so is the consultant community. Development activity is very, very high, and our consultants are seeing a very high workload. So we want to track that, make sure that we all have visibility on what's going on there. The next thing we're going to do is look at our timelines and clocks. That's something we've heard from PED and others. Do our timelines kind of match with some other jurisdictions? Are we meeting those timelines? And then we really want to make sure that we're getting back to that standard that I talked about at the beginning, that the development community has predictable and consistent review timelines for what they can expect when they come in for our process. So that's something we're going to be looking at. And then finally, one of the things we're going to be doing is looking at large project development reviews. So this is something we've done on a couple of projects, and we think we'd like to expand to a much broader audience so that when a project comes in, we can have a regular standing meeting, whether that's monthly or some other time frame, where we're sitting down on that large complex project and we're really looking out. And if you got a large complex project, they're going to be building and developing over years, not just months. And what we really want to do is put in place a process where we understand what their plan is, what their priorities are, and then we're working to prioritize the reviews and the process so that it's meeting their overall goals. And so we're excited about that process. We've seen that work very well and a couple of other large things. So the example I'd use is Gaylord. We were able to get the Gaylord project done on time and on budget. So that's a kind of example we're using for having those regular standing meetings to really track issues, making sure we're working ahead on those issues, identifying them early, and then solving problems. Because for large, complex projects, you'll have problems. You just will. That's the nature of the project being large and complex. The challenge really is making sure we're identifying them, we're solving them, and we're not letting those issues slow the project down or create issues for either staff or for the applicant. So those are kind of how we've broken down the initiatives. Next slide. And so this is kind of what those initiatives look like from a time frame. As Councilmember Zvonek said, we're not going to be able to get it all done tomorrow. We'd like that, but this is going to take a lot of work. And so we want to kind of be realistic about how long some of these things are going to take. So you'll see those initiatives laid out here on the timeline as to how when we think we'll start them and how they'll lay out. The next slide. And so then a couple additional information that we've heard, as I noted from council, in-person meetings are available. We've heard that from you all. We've heard that from developers. If folks want an in-person meeting, we will make that available. We're going to meet developers and applicants wherever they're at. If they want a virtual meeting, we'll do it virtual. If they want a hybrid meeting, we'll facilitate a hybrid meeting where some folks are virtual, some folks are in person. And if they want an entirely in-person meeting, we will make that available. So we've done that. That's implemented, and it's something that we'll continue to monitor. I will tell you that recruiting and staffing vacancies remains a challenge. So it's something that we're continuing to do and stay on top of. We have a number of vacancies. We're working with HR to make sure that our salaries are competitive and that we're in that market, but it remains a challenge. So one of the things that we're doing because of that staffing challenge is when workload demands, we will contract out reviews. So we have a number of different areas where we have hired third-party private entities, engineering firms or others to conduct portions of our reviews. So again, that our staffing challenges are not holding up the development community. So that's something that we've done and we'll continue to evaluate. We will be doing quarterly development reports to council where we'll talk about revenue, expenditures, workload and performance on how we're doing. And then we're also going to be providing updates on all those initiatives that we just laid out. So we'll be going to PED at least quarterly with those updates across the board. And then the other thing that PED had asked for earlier this year is they really wanted us to look at a fee comparison for how our fees compared to jurisdictions across the metro region. So not only Denver, but other jurisdictions as well. So we'll be pulling that together later this summer and providing that to PED in a few months. So with that, next slides. Are there any questions on that? I know that the one question I'll go and anticipate is that we had dozens of individual comments from a number of different developers and agencies. And what we've done is gone through and tried to consolidate those into light comments. As I said, there were a lot of comments that were duplicate. So we knew that those were issues. So we've done that. So we've tried to make sure that we've got non-duplicative comments, and then we've really tried to break them into what we consider to be actionable steps. So those things that we can build into projects and track our improvements, and we're not kind of chasing individual comments out, but we know that you all as council have heard from a number of different constituents. If you want individual feedback or a follow-up on those individual comments, we can absolutely help you trace how those flow through the system and get you a status on when whoever was making that comment can expect to see some movement.
Mayor.
Mayor Pro Tem.
No, it's Jernsky.
Councilmember Jernsky.
Yeah. So Jason, I just want to know, I appreciate all of this being relayed to us. But my question is, is there a plan to relay this to the development community? Is there something that we can put together that can go out, an email, something that can go out? I think as the chair of the PED committee, maybe Councilmember Zvonek as the vice chair, if we could be CC'd on that or brought in on that. I just want to know that this is being relayed.
Yeah, so we want to come to council first, make sure you all are okay with the plan. If you all are okay with that plan, absolutely. That's our intent to communicate that out. As Laura indicated earlier, we have meetings every other month with what we call the Joint Task Force, which is a group of developers, builders, and others. So that is one format that we could put it out. And then I think the other thing we've talked with Councilmember Zvonek about is putting updates on this on the city's website, so that again, folks come to the website, they can see the plan, they can see those updates. And again, we want to make sure that all of our steps along the way are informed by customer feedback. So we don't want to make changes if it's not really going to solve the problem. So part of our plan is to make sure that we're communicating with developers, builders, and others to make sure that any changes we're making are really going to solve the underlying issues. So the answer to your question is yes, we plan to communicate as soon as you all tell us that we're headed in the right direction.
Mayor Zvonek.
Councilmember Zvonek.
Yeah, just on that question, we actually talked about this today in a kind of a pre-meeting for our final red tape reduction committee, which is later this week. Kim Stewart and her team are going to help us put together a external communication plan so that we're making sure this information is getting out to the various newsletters, that we're getting to the people who are going to be impacted by this, because this is only going to be as impactful as it is to those who are the end users of and the development process. And we want those stakeholders, as we're making the changes and updating them through PED, we want their feedback to make sure that the comments and challenges they brought forward to us are in fact being addressed by the solutions that are being brought forward. So we will talk about that in our final red tape reduction committee this Thursday, to talk about that external communication plan from the city and what it would look like going forward.
Further discussion, questions?
Mayor Sundberg.
Councilmember Sundberg.
Thank you, DCM Jason and Laura, for the efforts in continuity and continuous improvement between your departments. One complaint or concern that I've heard from developers is seeing people in person at the city and just being able to go from person to person. Are you seeing people back to work almost in entirety in those necessary departments?
Yeah, so I think yes, we have folks back in the office. They're back in the office now again, as I said. And if developers want to see folks in person, absolutely, we will accommodate that and make sure that we get meetings set up in person.
Great, thank you.
Other questions?
Yes, Mayor.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes. So just, I want to reiterate. So when you said you're going to be able to make sure that all the issues, because there were so many that came forward in the public hearings, that all those questions and issues will be addressed to us. We're going to get like, yes, that was addressed. Yes, check mark, check mark.
Yeah, so I think what we really want to do is take all those individual comments, like I said, take out all the duplicates. Some of them were comments,
right.
And so we were sort of going to take some of those out, and we really want to come up with that action list, and then we're going to report to PED, and then, as Councilmember Zvonek said, the communication plan to let folks know that this item is complete, it's in place, we've made that change, or this is in progress.
Right.
This is when you can expect to see that change happen.
Yeah, I mean, I was on the call earlier and asked not only for the communications to go out, but then to be done also on the website. So I know they're going to coordinate on making sure that, that we talk about what is being done for the changes, but also to make sure that we don't have inconsistencies on the, if you were to go into the planning part of the website, that all is consistent and there's no issues. But so I know there were questions like very specific on licensing and certain fees and so forth. So same thing, you're going to be able to give an answer to those.
So yeah, so one of the things we've talked about is this is really the development portion. I would say that it was probably at least half, probably 2/3 of the comments overall received by the red tape committee. I think there was another group of that were associated with licensing, associated with fees. And so that will be coming forward and will be consistent in terms of how we're reporting on whether something's complete or whether, where it's at. We'll be working with Roberto and the finance department on those. And then there's a couple of items outside of either licenses and fees and development, but we'll make sure that we're consistent in terms of how we report on all the comments received by the Red Tape Committee.
Okay, and then lastly, on the, I know a lot of comments were at that very first meeting that developers have with staff, that there's maybe junior staff members, and so they were asking for some more expertise at the initial, because that's what the issue, when you get comments later in the process instead of at the beginning. So is that part of that multi-department review team? Because that doesn't come up till later this year. So it's just, how can you expedite that?
Laura, you want to jump in there?
So that one, it's really multifaceted. So there's a couple of pieces. There's the Public Works reorganization, which will help with consolidation of staff, because right now plan review is happening across multiple teams in Public Works. So that will help. But also it's checklists across the process. So making sure staff are following checklists, there's quality assurance and quality control at every step of that checklist. So really that's the process improvements they're multifaceted across various levels of the organization and steps in the development review process. And that is happening much sooner than the timeline that you're seeing later with the teams. The teams is implementing the process improvements that we work through from the base up.
Okay, very good. So if someone has an issue, there'll be they won't just say, no, you can't do it. There'll be someone that could answer the question and make sure that there is not an inconsistency in code and so forth.
Yes, our goal is to reduce the number of inconsistencies, late comments, et cetera, that we're seeing.
Okay, thank you.
Further discussion?
Mayor?
Councilmember Coombs.
Yeah, so there was several mentions of staff turnover vacancies. So I'm just wondering, as we're kind of carrying out this additional recruiting to backfill existing vacancies, how are we going to address morale and retention and workload issues for the current staff that we do still have?
So it's something I think as we're looking at filling the positions we've got, we're also looking at, do we have enough staff? And actually we'll be coming to PED pretty soon here to talk about, even with the challenges we have in recruiting, given the current workload, we think we need to probably look at some additional staff, given the current workload. And then I think the morale issues and those things are part and parcel to we don't want to burn out the folks that we do have here. And so your comments are very well made. It is something that I know Laura and I and all the directors are keenly aware of. And so our staffs are working really, really hard. They're producing at a very high level. And so we want to recognize that. At the same time, while making sure that we are improving processes, improving systems, and just really making sure that we're delivering for our customers as much as we can.
Further discussion? Seeing none, is there any objection to moving item number 4C forward? Seeing none, item number 4C will move forward. Item number 5A, 2022 certificates of participation. Councilmember Dustin Zavala.
Yeah, so as part of the annual road maintenance plan that we moved forward a few weeks back, in order for us to address the deferred maintenance that has been accumulating going back to 2008, we decided to move forward with the certificate of participation program that would backfill that up to $35 million. So this ordinance is just authorizing staff to go ahead and start issuing those bonds.
Questions to staff or Councilmember Zavala?
Mayor.
Councilmember O'Connell.
Thank you, sir. I just wanted some clarification from staff as to what the estimated cost would be with interest for the 35 if we have to go to the 30-year scenario at 5.5% interest. I understand that's the worst case scenario. I just want to know what that looks like.
Right, so the ordinance that was in your packet authorizes parameters. So we've authorized, the ordinance authorizes a maximum of $35 million par, an interest rate not to exceed 5.5%, and a term of 30 years or less. What we've modeled to date is a 20-year issuance. If this was issued today, and interest rates, as you know, are moving, they're very volatile right now, but we're looking at 20 years. And if we issued today, and just saying that it takes a number of months to get ready to issue bonds, but if we issue today, it would be about 4.25%. And for 20 years, that would be about $2.65 million a year. So I haven't totaled that up, but it would be 20 years, $2.65 million a year at a 4.25% interest rate today.
All right, thank you.
Oh, okay. Further discussion?
Mayor?
Questions is Mayor Pro Tem.
You just mentioned that that's going to take a couple months. Is there any way to expedite that? Interest rates are going up every day.
Yeah, no, that would be lovely. But we have to go through a process of developing the offering documents. We have to go through a ratings process. We will go as fast as we can. It's just the steps that you have to take to get to a public offering of debt are very well defined, and they do take some time, but we will certainly go as quickly as we can. Unfortunately, it's not today, but yes, we will expedite it to the extent that we are able to do that.
So I would imagine that this is going to go forward with a waiver of reconsideration.
I believe that's true. So we're looking at going to City Council, the first reading on the 27th, I believe. And then, yes.
Thank you.
Further discussion? Seeing none, is there any objection to move 5A forward? Seeing none, 5A will move forward. 5B, support of widening Gun Club Road, Highway 30. Mayor Pro Tem Bergen, Councilmember Sundberg.
Thank you. It's pretty straightforward. We're basically just advocating to make sure that we do everything possible to secure funds, any kind of funds that are out there to expedite the widening of Gun Club Road. And obviously it goes through multiple jurisdictions. North of Quincy is a state highway, and south of Quincy is Aurora, and obviously some parts of Arapahoe County. And then we also have the Saria authority as well. So this just really is just to prioritize the need to try to secure funding.
Is there questions on item number 5B? Seeing none, is there any objection to moving item number 5B forward? Seeing none, item number 5B will move forward. Rules of Order and Procedure Amendment to International Travel. I'll pass my virtual gavel over to the Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. So do you want to go ahead and explain what the resolution is?
It is an amendment to our rules, and it states on page 334 under item number 3, international travel. All international travel for the mayor and members of city council at taxpayers' expense shall be prohibited unless such travel is approved by 6 council members and the mayor. This approval could take place during a study session. It must also be specifically requested by either the Office of International and Immigrant Affairs or Aurora Sister Cities International Program.
Okay. Discussion?
Mayor Pro Tem.
Yes, Mayor, Councilmember Coombs.
Yeah, so this has been a debacle of a conversation thus far. But it seems to me that this proposal is primarily designed to make a political statement and to attack political adversaries through the making of policy, which is not what the making of policy is for. And so if there is a fiscal reason, right, if we're going to say this is because it's not fiscally responsible and a good use of taxpayer money, then I'd like to ask if we can have an amendment to look at not spending more than the GSA per diem on on the total cost of any trip anywhere. So that means your flight can't be over the GSA per diem, your hotel can't be over the GSA per diem rate for that trip. And so the whole thing combined for the amount of time you're there has to fit within that GSA per diem rate. So we're not spending in excess of reasonable expectations for any trip anywhere.
So I would say that that would have to come up as a separate rules change, so you could bring that to the Rules Committee, because I think for this one, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mayor, but you're requesting this as it is, and any changes to the per diem would go through rules as a separate.
That's correct. And this applies to all international travel, even if it's requested by Sister Cities International or requested by our Office of International and Immigrant Affairs.
Further discussion?
Yeah, just to clarify.
Sure.
I'm not talking about international travel in this case. I'm talking about domestic travel and domestic trips that are in excess of a reasonable cost. So, for example, when you look at Accelerate Colorado, that's even a charter flight, and it's about double, I believe, the GSA frequency that you would pay for flight, hotel, food, etc. So that's the type of thing that I'm talking about, is that we look at all of our travel, that we not be saying, oh, international travel is just really bad unless we politically approve, but that if we really want to be fiscally responsible, that we make a resolution that is about fiscal responsibility and about the location of your travel.
Oh, Mayor Pro Tem. I think you can certainly bring that forward as a separate proposal, but this applies to international travel.
Further discussion?
Mayor Pro Tem.
Yes, Councilmember Marco.
This is just a question for the mayor. Why is the focus of this on international travel specifically, especially given the fact that some domestic conferences are much more expensive, or at least comparable, than some international conferences?
Because we're locally elected officials.
Mayor.
I'm sorry. Because we're locally elected officials, and I think that international travel for locally elected officials is always suspect, and this creates transparency to the taxpayers about what we're doing.
Okay, thank you. Further discussion?
Mayor Pro Tem.
Yes, Councilmember Murillo.
Thank you. So if international travel is suspect, does that include your trip to El Salvador, or are we just selectively, applying opinions of what appropriate international travel looks like? I guess I'm curious about your international travel as a locally elected official.
Mayor, would you like to respond?
Sure. That would have to, under this proposal, that would have to come through the process, and it would have to, although it would be required, that was requested by the Office of International Office of what is it?
Mayor Pro Tem.
Yes, and just real clear to
here. I'm going to finish my point.
Oh, he's not done. Okay.
I'm trying to answer your question. If you could refrain from interrupting me, so that that would have to go through the process. And so, if there weren't 6 members supporting it, then in fact it wouldn't go forward.
Okay, Councilmember Murillo.
Except you didn't answer my question, which you're kind of good at. My question was, what does that mean for the trip that you already took? is that suspect? Is your trip suspect?
It was not something that I decided to go on an international conference to Paris. This was requested that I go because we have a consulate from the government of El Salvador here. And so it was a request by Mr. Gambetta's office.
Okay.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Yes, Councilmember Murillo.
So you're saying you didn't have the free will to choose and decide to go?
It was a request and I honored that.
May I please interrupt? We need to not go back and forth with this and personal, let's stick to the rule change. And this is about whether we're going to change the international travel to have vote by 6 members. The past is the past. We're looking at moving forward.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Yes, Councilmember Murillo.
Thank you. I mean, it's hard to have like a serious conversation when this was just like a PR stint by the mayor. I do think if we want to be mindful about costs and expenses, Councilmember Coombs laid out a process for us to approve travel expenses. But, I think council colleagues, I have given the professional courtesy to decide that, how they want to spend their travel budget thus far. If we want to micromanage and add another layer of silly bureaucracy of politicizing a travel and training budget, I mean, that's, for us to decide. But I think it's what a silly conversation we're having when I think it's very clear that this is like a non-issue. In fact, I guess kind of just speaking for myself, in response to recent travel that I've made, I actually wasn't, it wasn't until the mayor took his trip to El Salvador that I was like, maybe that might be an allowable use for, travel, even though, it wouldn't have been the first time that a council member had traveled. So yeah, I don't know. It's hard to entertain this as a serious conversation because it's really not. It's just a political PR stunt.
And I'll just make a statement that this is, again, going to require a vote by 6 council members to approve international travel, including Aurora sister cities or anything that comes out of international and immigrant affairs. I think other council members did go on that trip to El Salvador as well. I think Councilmember Marcano attended, and I can't remember if there was another council member. But if we can stick to this, whether if there's further discussion on this specific resolution, if someone wants to bring forth another resolution on domestic travel, that is your prerogative as well. So further discussion? Is there any objection to moving 5C forward?
Marcano?
Mayor Pro Tem Murillo.
Well, I heard Councilmember Marcano and then Councilmember Murillo.
Yeah.
Medina as well.
Okay, Marcano, Murillo, Medina, and then Coombs. Councilmember Marcano?
Yeah.
You're up. Yes.
Yeah, I objected. I'm sorry. Did you want me to say something?
I'm sorry.
Oh, no, that's okay. That's okay.
I thought you had something to say. Okay, so we have.
No, I will just say that I think that we're just, this is just political showmanship, and it is what it is. I guess the mayor has the votes to, run his little game here. But I think politicizing our travel when it's already a transparent process, when anyone can just ask the city and they will very readily provide all of those documents, when we have very clear rules for what is and is not allowed. And, the city goes through the extreme trouble of ensuring that there's not even the appearance of impropriety with our travel. I just think this is honestly a shame, a waste of staff resources, and the mayor should be ashamed of himself.
Okay, so I have 4 that objected to it, and so it will move forward. Okay, next, Mayor, your gavel is returned.
I respect my virtual gavel. see, number, let's see,
5D.
okay, 5D, rules of order and procedure amendment, consent calendar. Councilmember Gardner, who I believe is not with us this evening. Is there, Mr. Brotzman, you're down on it for it?
Sure. This basically changes our agenda to a consent agenda for those items that don't require a public hearing. So everything on the agenda can be voted on at once, unless a council member and for any reason wants to pull an item. So this speeds up the process of moving through an agenda. Again, giving council members, there is a new notice requirement that was added after the ad hoc rules committee meeting as requested. So by 1 o'clock on the day of the regular meeting, you have to identify that you're going to pull an item. So there isn't a surprise to the rest of council that you're pulling something at the you're pulling an item at the last minute. So this is again, it takes into account those items that are a matter of course that the city deals with on a regular basis, allows us to go through. Should point out, this is basically the procedure that Denver uses.
Mayor?
Mayor Pro Tem.
This did go to the Rules Committee, so I just want to add a little context to what with our attorney Brotzman just stated. So any item that is currently on our agenda would be considered consent unless pulled as stated by 1 o'clock on the day of the regular meeting. However, public hearings would still be, of course, on the agenda, as well as appointments, I believe, and nominations. So if you wanted to, if a council member wanted to ask a question or had a concern, they would then request to have that pulled. And they have, of course, until, when the agenda comes out on Thursday, they would have that time up until Monday at 1. And then also, just to clarify, if a resident wants to ask a question about an agenda item, they also would have the ability to let the city clerk know that they would like an item pulled, and therefore anything that's pulled, staff presentation would be made and staff would be present for it. So it's really just a procedural process to expedite our meetings. And I will say that on behalf of Councilmember Gardner, that we do have policy committees that typically items go to, and also study session. So those, we've already heard it, usually in committee and then in study session. I was going to ask if we could please, and this would be for Dan Brotzman to maybe answer, if we could add a notation on any item that did not go to study session, that would be noted kind of as a red flag for us. That if it's very rare that something doesn't go to study session first, but I thought it might be a good idea to add that notation if it did not go to study session.
And if the mayor, as we're proving that's easy to do, we will do that if council wishes to add that notation.
Let me just say that I just think that, I think it's just less transparent for the individual who, the resident who's observing the city council meeting, didn't pay attention to study session or policy committee, that, we're just whizzing through this stuff. And I just don't feel very comfortable with it at all. Further discussion.
Yeah, Mayor, it's Councilmember Lawson.
Councilmember Lawson.
So I wasn't at the Rules Committee when this came to the committee. My issue is with this is because I know we want to be efficient. I know we want to get through these meetings, but this is kind of what we signed up for. And it seems like even with the public invited to be heard, with this particular proposal, we're not even allowing, 1 o'clock, some, constituents and people are kind of doing at work on the weekend. How are they going to know whether to pull something by 1 o'clock? Even us. And to me, we're just limiting the voice of people on issues, and I have a real problem with that. And so for me, this is a problem. I know we want to hurry up the agenda, and I know we want to do that, but how are we going to have a constituent who really wants to talk about something and they have to do it by 1 o'clock? Sometimes in people's lives, they're not even thinking about that. And it just seems like day by all the time, we're just kind of limiting the voice of people in our city, our constituents. So I have a real issue with this, just moving stuff off the consent, just everything. And even for myself, what if I want to pull something, but I'm not available at 1 o'clock? So now if this goes through, which it probably will, I have to make sure that I'm on target as well as everybody else to make sure whatever we're going to be presenting, we must pull it by 1 o'clock. I just think it's just further limiting voice of people. So I have a real problem with this.
Mayor. Mayor.
Yeah, just also just to clarify, I think and I'm speaking again on behalf of Councilmember Gardner since he's not here, but I believe also part of his reasoning on this was so that staff doesn't have to be present if their item is on consent. If no one has a question or an issue, a constituent doesn't have one, or a council member doesn't have one, because we've seen it multiple times that those staff members would not have to be, at the city building and at 10 o'clock at night, and then find out there was actually no question on their item and they had to sit through the whole meeting.
Mayor Jurenski.
Councilmember Jurenski.
Yeah, I'd actually like to see this tabled. I mean, if the sponsor isn't even here to defend it, I'd like to see this table, and actually some of the arguments made that I'm hearing tonight are possibly changing my mind on where I stand. Councilmember Gardner has 2 things on the agenda tonight and unfortunately can't join us. And I think this should be tabled. I think he should have to be here to defend it.
Is there any objection to tabling item number 5D until the next regular study session? I mean, until the next study session. Seeing no objection, item number 5D will be tabled until the next study session. Item number 5E, Rules of Order and Procedure Amendment, Council Dialogue. Councilmember Jurenski.
Yes, thank you. This is something that I was bringing through the Rules Committee, but as I brought it up, Attorney Brotzman said that this is actually something that's already a rule. I'm a little disappointed that it hasn't been addressed during council meetings, but it now needs to be known that this is an actual rule. So this isn't something that I have on the agenda that I'm looking to even move forward from study session, and I'm surprised that it made it on the agenda. I thought it was just going to be addressed. But this is regarding the council's ability to address the public when they make comments like in public invited to be heard.
Can you explain what is that?
I don't know, Attorney Brotzman, if you want to step in, but.
Sure. And this was changed within the last few years, but one of the changes that did come up is not a dialogue between speakers at the podium and council members, that there is no back and forth. I think that's correct no matter what. We went to exchanging contact information and clarifying statements. And the question becomes, what is a clarification of a statement and when is a council member making their own statement and their own speech, but which is the mayor's call. The key to all of this is that, again, that dialogue, there is no conversation with the speakers and council that any clerk, you can always ask for the clerk for contact information or to get staff with a speaker, but all of the clarifications, all of the statements come after the speakers have left. So at the end of public invited to be heard, once all the speakers are done, that's when the clarification would come.
So, Mayor.
I'm sorry. Okay. Councilmember Johnson.
So just to clarify, there already is a rule that in public invited to be heard, whatever it is that the public says, if we feel that we need to make a clarifying statement on it, that is something that is in our current rules. And if you would like us to wait until all speakers, have had their chance to speak in public invited to be heard, fine, let's go ahead and clarify that portion of the rule, but this is an actual rule already.
Okay. Well, let me ask the city attorney, is that, then it's at my discretion when to recognize the council member, and I can wait until after public invited to be heard to go through that. So I don't have the back and forth debate.
And yes, because again, in another section of the rules, that power is granted to the mayor.
Okay, that's what we'll do then. Then the resolution itself is not necessary then?
No.
Okay.
Mayor?
I'm sorry, Mayor Pro Tem.
Well, I thought it was needed because it was added that the comments would be made at the conclusion of the public invited to be heard. So you're saying that you might recognize them earlier?
Mayor Jurinsky. Yeah, so I believe, Mayor Pro Tem, that is at the mayor's discretion, whether, he wants to allow us to address. So I think, Mayor, you should just clarify that. If you want us to wait, huh?
Yeah, but you can memorialize that through this resolution by saying that you're going to have a rule that says that's exactly what the mayor has to do. Can't Councilmember Jurinsky do that, Dan?
That's what this draft does. Is it?
So we're then memorializing that
Right.
after public invited be heard, for clarifying comments or the ability to answer one of the speakers in public invited be heard, that the mayor then will recognize members of council after all speakers have been that after all speakers are finished. Okay.
Mayor?
Mayor Pro Tem.
Sorry, there's also another part of this, which is council, and it's already in there. It's just added. There was an added part. So it says council shall be given the opportunity to address staff to exchange contact information. But then what was added was when the speaker is at the podium. So that's a new change.
Okay.
So I would ask Councilmember Jurinsky if she wants to move forward with the changes that were made in this rule or not.
I mean, as a governing body, we can vote on that. What I am concerned, what I care about is being able to address comments made during public invited to be heard. That's my concern. Everything else that was added in there, we can vote on it.
I think you can combine that together. I don't think that you need that part of it, because then I'm going to recognize you anyway, or any member anyway, after public invited be heard's done, whether or not you want to comment on something that was said, or whether you want to request contact information. That could be done at that time.
Mayor?
Councilmember Coon.
It's Bergen.
Mayor Pro Tem Bergen.
Okay, my only concern is it has on here, council shall be given the opportunity to address staff to exchange contact information when the speaker is at the podium. Okay. If you, and the only reason I'm saying that is because the speaker may leave, like they may not sit through 20 people. Okay. So if we are not able to
Okay.
address that contact, exchange contact
Okay.
information, they're already gone.
Good, let's leave it like it is then. Okay, I understand. Okay, is there any objection to the resolution?
Mayor.
I'm sorry.
Mayor.
Councilman.
Thank you. So I know we discussed this at rules and, that there's already a limitation on our dialogue, but my concern continues to be that we're basically setting up a situation where council gets the last word. And I am still upset that we got rid of public invited to be heard at the end of the meeting. So honestly, I would prefer us to just have to wait until the end of the meeting. I think that's what we discussed last time this came up. Just so that, and frankly, I would really like us to see us reestablish public invited heard at the end of the meeting as well. Because I don't think elected officials should ever be the ones with the last word.
Further discussion. I'm sorry. Further discussion. Councilmember Coombs.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate that point. I think there's already such a big power differential between elected officials and regular citizens that I'm concerned that this enhances and increases that rather than creating more opportunity for community members to.
Okay. Is there objection to the Jurinski resolution?
Mayor.
Medina.
I'm sorry, Councilmember Marcano.
Councilmember Medina.
Yes, sorry, Medina and Marcano.
Medina, further objection?
Mayor Sundberg, I just want to make a quick comment. I don't oppose it, but I think we need to be careful that we're not, as council members, in response, appearing overly defensive or argumentative, and that we need to value the public's input without appearing as, I don't know, argumentative. There's something to keep in mind.
Very well. Further discussion? Seeing none, the resolution, then we'll move forward. Seeing no further business before the city council, meeting is adjourned.